tons of. The other, not so much. Still have my thing. Just turn it over.
Okay, I'll see if I can get this to.
Wait.
What was that? I'm sorry.
Yes, now I'm ready. Sorry.
Are you sure?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry.
It is really dusty. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome you out to the City Council meeting this evening. Actually, we are not convening our City Council meeting just yet. We have scheduled at 7 p.m. a public hearing, and the City Council meeting will officially begin immediately following the public hearing. The public hearing is for the purpose of the vacation of 0.14 acres of right-of-way on 100 North Street at approximately 650 East. Mr. Thompson, will you just give us a brief summary of what is being proposed, and then we'll open the public hearing for this agenda, for this item only.
Yes. Sorry, I've got a couple different slideshows here, so I'm trying to get the right one up. The proposal is to vacate a small piece of right-of-way that has never been developed at the top of 100 North at about 650 East. Currently, the road goes to about 650 East and then terminates. The right-of-way continues on up about another 300 or 400 feet. The request is to vacate that piece of road so that they can develop the property. The road in its current alignment doesn't accommodate development in the best manner, so they would like to vacate that piece of road and access the property through a private lane. That we'll show you here in just 1 second. It always works at 5-2. Not this one.
No go? Close?
It's now Jordan's fault.
Yeah. It's not even anything we can really move on to, but
Did you get a haircut, Mayor?
yes. Thank you.
That's all I got.
You want to just?
Okay, well, thank you. That's probably not appropriate for this meeting, but I appreciate the sentiment. All right, well, why that is coming up, are you close? I keep on waiting for the 5 seconds and we're there, but.
The green line's halfway across now, is all.
Okay. All right, well, We have an idea, as Mr. Thompson mentioned, the consideration is a right-of-way at 650 East, 100 North Street. My sense is most of those who are here to speak to that probably have an idea of the details and have done a little bit of research. We will, maybe we'll move forward with just opening the public hearing. As we mentioned, since this is for the vacation of the property at this location, the public hearing at this time, there will be a call to public for our regular meeting, but the public hearing tonight, right now, is just for this vacation. So with that, we will open the public hearing and ask each of you to come up one at a time and state your name and any comments you would like to give regarding this vacation of right-of-way. And we do ask that you attempt to keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. Our city recorder does keep track of time, and when the timer beeps, that's an indication that your time has expired. So with that, we'll open public hearing.
Hi, I'm Matt Briggs. I own the property at the east end of 100 North, past where he's proposing to put the subdivision in. I have some major concerns with that because I own both pieces of property on the sides of the street that the city owns there. I actually own 3 sides of it. So I want to make sure that I've got access to my property and protect my rights to do what I need to do with that. You know, in the future, I have no plans of building a home or anything in there, but I'd like to make sure that, you know, if we get to a situation where we need to, that we could do that. If he does, if we do vacate that, that'll basically leave me landlocked, sitting there where I can't even access my property. I have no way to get to it from where my house is. The only way to come to it is from the bottom there, where the city owns the street right through there, and I'd like to see it stay the way it is.
And so just to be clear, and what was your name, sir? I'm sorry, again. What was your
My
name?
name is Matt Briggs.
Matt Briggs, Mr. Briggs. So you say you own on 3 sides of this?
I own
East side.
this piece here and that piece there.
Here and here?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And the home right here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The other issue is that there's a lot of problems with that piece of property on the north side of that, as far as water issues go. That's been a problem down there. I'm sure the city knows that you've spent a fair amount of money down there working on that over the last year. I sit there and look at it every day, so I know what's going on there. The developer doesn't. He seems to think he can fix it, which I don't think you can, because if you start regrading everything, and as I've talked to him, if he regrades everything, it's gonna push the water problem back up onto my property. And I don't wanna see that either. So I'd like to see the access just stay right through the center of it so that I can get into my 2 pieces of property to protect my rights. And, you know, I can't be landlocked there. He has offered to give me an easement on the north end there, right against that yellow line. But I have a creek that runs through right where all those trees are at, following that yellow line there, that stops right at the property line and goes into a big culvert there. And that takes up probably 15 feet from the property line before I can even get around that. I've got trees down in there that I have to destroy. And then if I wanted to build anything, I would want to build it up here on this piece, because there's water issues down there on that piece. So I'd be responsible for putting a driveway all the way clear up into here. Which, you know, I just like don't have the money to do that. I don't think that it's fair for the city to give away a piece of ground and leave me sitting there devaluing my property.
Thank you.
Because my property will be basically worth nothing.
Thank you.
The bottom line of this whole thing is everybody's known that the city owns that piece of property there. talked about it, I've talked to the neighbors about it, we've known about it, you know, there's water issues down there. All of a sudden, one day, I got a phone call, and I talked to a guy, says, I need to meet you. As soon as he walks in, he tells me, we bought that property and we're building a subdivision. Well, I would think that they'd take me into consideration there.
Thank you.
Before we go this far.
Thank you.
Everything that I've tried to talk to him about, I think it basically comes down to he needs that ground to build enough houses to make it worthwhile. If you notice around that,
And sir, your time has expired. We'd ask you to wrap up your comments too, if you could,
if you
please.
notice around that, most of the pieces of property are bigger pieces of property. So I'd just like to say, you know, a lot of them own an acre, half acre, 3/4 of an acre, and then we're gonna come in and put 5 houses on an acre. It just doesn't seem to fit well there to me. Besides all the water issues that are in the bottom of that, because the creek rips down there, it's just a low spot, and it's always been a catch basin. So hopefully, I get my rights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sue Tice. I live at 633 East 100 North, so I'm the last house on one side of that cul-de-sac. And I absolutely agree that this bridge should not be landlocked. When I sat on the planning commission for 5 years, that was something we certainly took into consideration of never landlocking somebody. That should really be the only reason we need to give. But to move on further, you know, just because something's possible doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. And putting 5 houses on that piece of property is not the right thing to do. First of all, there's a line there. I don't know if that's actually a property line. There's a fence there, but that's not my property line. I doubt that that's been surveyed with my property line properly demarked over there, because we had an agreement with Mr. Stewart, my father-in-law, who built our house, and Mr. Stewart had an agreement many, many years ago, so that Mr. Stewart's horses, cows could get down to the water. My father-in-law said, yeah, no problem, put the fence where it is so that your cows can get down there. The fence has never been moved. We've had livestock down there. We just recently had to get rid of our horses because of this whole issue, because we leased that property up to this point. I grant that it's not our land. But that's an issue. We do know that water is a huge issue. I have video of how bad the flooding is, even since the gates. In December, when my son was standing knee-deep in that, trying to get the gate in the middle of that field to let the water go down, the water was clear back up into the barn and covered all the corrals. It was bad. So I do know that there is a water issue. It has been dealt with somewhat, but there's still a water issue. And putting houses over that kind of bad land is not a viable thing to do. So again, property line, the flooding issue, it landlocks Briggs, and the other neighbor across the street from me has been told that there's either going to be a road 20 feet from her house, would she rather like a road 20 feet from her house or a house 8 feet from her house? Doesn't sound like the neighborly thing to do, because either way, it's not a great thing, and I will address that later. But anyway, those are my reasons. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Taylor.
Would you move the microphone just towards you so we can hear you? Thank you.
I still don't, can you know? We live in the home adjacent to, that's the one, to the field, and I would just echo the concerns initially and foremost of landlocking Briggs and the abandonment of this city property. The proposed alternative is a lane that runs along that property line next to our home, which
Is the switch on? Can you turn on the top there?
If I was on, then it should be on.
Okay.
So, I live at 619 East, 100 North, directly west of the Tices. So I'm kitty corner from this proposed easement. So the reason for this easement abandonment would be to develop the property just to the south of it. Those that are benefiting from this abandonment are the developer and those that own the property. So I suggest that they provide right of way across their property, which accesses Center Street. Therefore, the easement would no longer need to be abandoned on our side. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Chris Tice. I also live at the property at 633 East 100 North in Kaysville. I'm just here to speak on the water issues and being the one that's taken care of this property for many, many years. The water issues on this land started back when they originally built the house across from mine. When the Gers split their property, I was maybe junior high age. Within months of building that home, there was multiple floods on basic rain days, nothing crazy. As we have seen the property be further developed into a cul-de-sac and the home that the Taylors now live in, the flooding has become worse to the point of going over the berm, which was a roughly 4.5 foot buildup of water. No offense to anybody in this room, but the city does a very poor job at taking care of this area, and I have been down there constantly cleaning out debris and everything from the area. Now, I also work for a company, Marriott Construction. We do development, and we are currently involved in doing the development down at Hill Farms. I have shown pictures of flooding to some of the uppers in this company, and have been told that there is a 10-year sinkhole sitting in front of my house, if there's anything built there. Nothing more.
I live 2 homes west of the development that goes in there. The change. I just want to say a couple of things. I was here originally when they approved to make a change and let a lot be built next to me. And I've seen the problems that occurred from that. First of all, as they have mentioned, the water is very severe. And I can tell you that I have spent many, many nights, all night out, in hip waders, making sure the flood drains were open enough that it wouldn't come into our property. And I do not believe that has completely been corrected at this point in time. And I think there needs to be some pretty extensive study before any change is made to this property and determine whether that water can be directed in a way that it's not going to be a problem again. Now, I know that Prince has done a lot of study in his own mind and what he could do to hold the water and hold it back and so forth. But I am convinced that without additional information, that it's all speculation whether it's going to work or not. And I just really think there needs to be this extensive study of the water, regardless of the rest of it, which I could take about 10 minutes talking about concerns. But I think we need to know whether that water can be directed and be handled before anybody makes a change in what can be built on this property. And that needs to take place before any change makes place. And I think it should have been done before, and it was not done. In fact, I was surprised as all get out when it was just approved to go ahead and build on the lot without looking at the issues. And so I really suggest that that is something that should take place.
Thank you.
My name's Michael Allen. I live on the corner of 6th East and 1st North. I've been there almost 40 years and have watched that dead end develop over the years. I have seen the houses built to the east of me. It's ruined a beautiful view of the mountains since I started there. And I'm awfully concerned also with the amount of the water and the problems that we have back there. The way the snow is removed from the cul-de-sac, it seems like some houses get 5 to 10 feet piled in front of their yards, and the other side of the street gets 0. What's going to happen when they build this up behind our houses? And I'm also concerned about, they're going to build 4 houses. How long will that take? Out of those 4 houses, let's say there's, 2 cars per family? That's 8 more cars that'll be driving back there. Plus, we have to worry about all the construction vehicles and all the other things that are involved in building new homes and progressing that way. And quite frankly, I don't want it. I don't want it in my neighborhood. It's filthy, it's nasty, it'll be that way for a couple of years. You can't open your windows in the summertime. There's dust everywhere. If the contractors and those who are putting this project in it better be held accountable to cleaning up with their bond, which I was required to purchase when I decided to add on to my house, which I never did, but I expected, somebody told me I needed a $50,000 bond just to clean the streets up in case I dumped some dirt out there if I was redoing my home. I would like to see that applied to these contractors. If they're going to do that, then I want the street cleaned up. I don't want 15,000 pieces of looks like cow manure laying out there everywhere for everybody to run over and muddy their cars up. And we don't need any more people back there. Quite frankly, what are you going to do about water in 5 years? The more people we let into this little village, which I'm 5th generation of, how many more people are you going to let into Kaysville? How much more water do we have up in those mountains? How many more will the city let people move into here? Maybe it's about time we shut the growth of the city down and remain the quaint little city that I grew up in, and I know Brother Snell grew up in when we were small. And I'm not familiar with the rest of you, but we're getting too big too fast. Let's stop this. Let's let the neighbors and the pheasants and the deer all roam back there, and we can all enjoy nature. But if you build those homes, it's all lost. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments for the public hearing?
My name is Spencer Prince. I'm the bad guy developer that they're talking about. Promise I'm not as bad as it sounds. But just a few of the things we have tried to take into account a lot of these issues, well actually all of these issues that have been talked about. If the road were to be built as is across the property, that would actually raise all of that land up, and if that were to create water issues, the road would create water issues. I believe that the water issues can be handled, but putting the road there would not solve it. Now, the reason that we're looking at it and putting in a private drive on this, it's a long, narrow property. A public road is too wide to be able to take up. Well, you can't take it down the middle. You couldn't get a lot on either side.
And Mr. Prince,
Yes.
I want to give you every opportunity to address,
Sure.
especially if you'd like to in the public hearing. Your agenda item is on the city council
Okay.
agenda, and I'm sure the council is going to have some questions. So I don't know if you want to wait.
No, I wasn't aware that that's how it's done, so
Sorry,
I
yeah,
will wait.
I'd probably clarify that, but
Sure.
you're more than welcome to take this opportunity. I'm
No.
just thinking, as you're talking, the council's probably going to have questions, and the Q&A wouldn't be appropriate for the public hearing, at least for you.
Okay.
And so if you want to wait for your presentation until we get to the agenda item, then we can allow some of that dialogue, if that's
Sure.
okay with you. But if you'd still like to take the rest of your time.
No, I am
You've got
fine. I
about
just didn't
90
know if I
seconds.
would have another opportunity, but thank
do.
you.
Yes, you do, considering you're the applicant.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other items for the public hearing?
My name is Megan Mayer, and I just want to back up what my neighbors have already said. I think it would be really unfair to Mr. Briggs to landlock his property I think he's been there for a long time, and I think he deserves to have access to the property that he legally owns. And the water issue it's ridiculous. You guys don't live there, you don't see it all the time. It's way worse than you think it is. And it's horrible to have your house flooded over and over and over because these issues don't get taken care of. So I just want to back them up with what all they've said. It's true, and I hope that you'll really consider the things that you've heard. That's it.
Thank you. Any other items? Hearing none, I'll welcome a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Schnell to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much for the comments. We will address the comments shared by the public in the public hearing when we get to item number 3 on the agenda, which will be coming up here shortly. We'll go ahead now at, time is 7:26 p.m. and convene the regular city council meeting. We will have a opening that will be provided by Councilmember Susan Lee, after which I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our dear and kind Heavenly Father, how grateful we are to be able to gather together as citizens of this city and representatives to be able to deal with and discuss the issues of this city that are before us this night. We pray that as we do so, that we'll do so with an open mind and also be able to meet the needs of those that are affected, and that we'll come to conclusions. And we're grateful for this opportunity, and we do humbly pray for these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Will the audience please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated. We'll begin with introductions. My name is Steve Hyatt, and I serve as the mayor of Kaysville City.
Jake Garn, City Council.
Dave Adams.
Susan Lee, City Council.
Chris Snell, City Council.
Larry Page, City Council.
Shane Scott, City Manager.
Maria Devereaux, City Recorder.
Dean Story, Finance Director.
Andy Thompson, Engineer.
Jordan Hanson, IT and Mapping.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. To begin on our agenda tonight, we do have agendas available on the wall over here to your left. You're more than welcome by the door to grab one and check off as we move through tonight's agenda items. The next item we have is call to the public, and before we jump into call to the public, we've been asked and am going to grant a special consideration request from the community councils at Snowhorse and Centennial Junior High. We had a meeting, Councilmember Garn, Councilmember Adams, and myself with the joint community councils earlier this week. They have a couple of requests as it relates to public safety for safe routes to schools. So we they asked, and we granted the opportunity to, before we begin call to the public, to allow them to take the call to the public time. We won't limit them to the 3 minutes for this presentation, but we'll turn the time to Snowhorse and Centennial Junior High Community Councils.
Hi, I am the chair over at Snowhorse Community Council, and last time I came under the
Sarah,
public...
will you just state your name for the record, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sarah Thatcher.
Thanks.
Thanks. I came 2 weeks ago, and I was told that we need to meet with our community councils to set up and show our SNAP plan so that you as a community or city council would be able to better know what our dealings are with our safety issues down over by Centennial and Snowhorse. So we are... These are our SNAP plans connected to that for Centennial and for Snowhorse. We were late, so this is...
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
So again, we'd like to thank Mayor Hyatt, who came to our meeting. It was 2 hours long with Jake Garn, and Dave Adams was there. We also had Josh Belknap from Public Works and Andy Thompson, the city engineer. And we discussed some of the problems that we're having. So we set up a PowerPoint for you guys to see our problems here. So if you turn the page for me, Andy, turn the page. Centennial Junior High currently has 1,520 students enrolled for this past year. The estimated of 1,600 students for this next year, 2017-2018. Snowhorse currently has 676 students enrolled for this year, and it's estimated to have the similar population. We do have 2 representatives from Centennial. One is Mrs. Robb. She's a counselor and on the community council. And then Rachel Alberts is also our principal from Snowhorse Elementary. And then we have community council members that have shown up from both of those. Also in this area, down at the very far south on Western and Angel, there is another school, Jefferson Academy, that has 600 students. And they are all driven because it's in a charter school, and they go as far as Roy, North, and then North Salt Lake. They all come out here. So those are all traveling, and they also begin their school at 8:10 at the same time Centennial does, and they also end their school at the same time Centennial does. So you have all that traffic with the 1,600 students, or the 1,520 and the 600. So quite a bit of traffic that is over there. We've lost a lot of the buses because with Davis District, if you are within elementary, it's 1.5 miles. If you live within that that space, then you get driven or walk, and then it's 2-mile radius around Centennial or junior highs through Davis. So we've recently lost a couple more buses, and so it's mostly traffic. So if you could show the next segment, Andy. This is just showing you Snowhorse. The last purple one was Centennial's boundary. So we go as far north as Gentile, or just south of Gentile, all the way down to the southern part of Kaysville. And then this one goes up to the park, the soccer park, north down to Western, and then just over to Sunset. Okay, the next. So this shows you the 3 schools, Centennials, and then there's a rail trail that the city has provided for safe routes, which we really appreciate. However, most of the traffic that comes from the north up in Quail Hollow and Mountain Vistas and the Wits End, and even over off of Kays Drive in that area, they'll cut across, they'll come down Old Mill, hit the rail trail, but a lot of them don't want to go the extra rail trail and then go across. They'll just cut down Sunset. So we're having a bunch of kids just walking down Sunset from Wits End to Centennial is our problem. So our big problem is currently, next slide. This is the concern that we're having. We even have some south because there is no sidewalks, but there is curb and gutter going south of the Centennial. A couple of areas don't have the curb and gutter, but it is a wider street with the extended shoulders, so it is a little bit safer. And then a couple of years ago, you guys did put down white lines, which really helped, but they are now faded. So, but if we could get those white lines, that would be a big push. But if you could get to the next one for me. So, next one, how about that? What? Here we go. So the narrow roads, this one right here, the middle picture is looking, so the left picture and the right picture are standing in the same direction. One is looking south, the one on the very far left, and the one in the middle is looking north on Sunset. So you can see how narrow the road gets halfway down Sunset from Old Mill. Old Mill is this, the very far right is Wits End looking down. So Old Mill meets right at Sunset and Wits End. Those three roads come together. So we just wanted to show you how narrow it gets when it gets closer to the school as opposed to farther. And the next slide, please. And then this is an example of the white stripping, which we really would appreciate and we really like. So this is going south on Sunset. That is the seminary building. This is where there is a crosswalk that comes from the rail trail, which we really appreciate the city providing. But this is looking south. The Centennial is directly to your right. Okay, next street, Next slide. So this is the corner of concern. Centennial is to the left of that white car, that big corner right there of Smith Lane. You're looking right down Smith Lane and Sunset. We're standing on Sunset. And so this corner that is the Watson's property, we appreciate you putting the curb and gutter, but I think you saw that there is a problem, thus we've got the curb and gutter as cars were trying to drive in and out of there all the time and getting too close. Next slide, if we could. So this is Smith Lane and how narrow it is right as to the north of Centennial. The buses, this is the bus loop. If you were to look right at Centennial, the buses come out of this little narrow area. I think we have 4 or 5 buses that still go that are able to take students. And then this view on the right is from the new Tyler Meadows subdivision, the street that just came in. I think it's Knight's Way, and that's looking to the east. And you can see that how much of the new dark area is where they came from the narrow road that was there, and they extended the shoulder to get to that subdivision. So that's quite a bit of, if we could possibly get that expanded for it further down as it gets closer to the school, that would be wonderful. Okay, next slide. This is just the white striping that was there. This is farther south. This is on Sunset, farther south from Centennial is behind us. The white striping has really helped with the students as they're walking, of course, but it is very faded, and so the cars and the students don't know. If we could get that white line back up there this summer to help the students know where they need to be walking and where the drivers need to be driving. We realize putting in sidewalks is an expense. We are not really coming before the board as a need on the sidewalks, although it is a need, but we realize that that's probably someplace in the future. But for this summer, our specific needs are, they're listed there, sidewalk, curb and gutter with equal widening of Sunset from Flint to, well, no, we want option 3, the bare minimum. If you look down, the widening of Sunset from Woods End to Smith, and Smith to the new Tyler Meadows, if we could just widen that corner. I don't know if we could get a close-up of that, but you'll see, we had some video where you could see the aerial and stuff where it's just really, it gets narrower right just north on Sunset from Centennial and just to the north on Smith Lane right around Centennial. So if we could get the widening or the expansion of a shoulder, that would help, and then the white striping, because then the kids would know where they're supposed to be and the cars would know where they're supposed to be, and we can try to keep some maintenance of organization. And then if we could possibly get a crosswalk, because the kids right there at Smith and Sunset are, they're just crossing willy-nilly. They're not, if you saw some of the videos that I was able to see, you could see the cars were parked waiting to turn onto Sunset from both ways. Kids are darting in between the cars as they're parked along the way, which is unsafe because the people driving onto Smith Lane don't know that the kids are darting through, and they're just trying to get across the busy Sunset. So if we could get a crosswalk and flags at that intersection of Smith and Sunset, that would really work. And then also on the other side of Smith, just right there at the Watson's place, if we could get a little sidewalk or somehow where the kids are off of the street at that corner, just so that the kids don't stay out in the street on that corner as they cross the crosswalk, then, and maybe just get a sidewalk that would go out to our extended shoulders, going north and going south. I don't think too many people go south, but if we could get a sidewalk that just tells them or takes them away from the busy corner and intersection to the extended shoulder that goes farther north on Sunset. Is there any questions on what we're kind of asking for?
None for me.
We were just hoping that maybe possibly because the school year is going to be beginning August 24th, if that is something that we could just get the expanded shoulder with the white striping would be the best possible things. If we could possibly get the crosswalk, we realize the kids are going to come no matter what. We've tried to teach them and educate them to take the rail trail and try to do that. It's just they take the fastest point from point A to point B, and they just don't, which I can understand. It's there. It's just who they are. So we have tried and attempted. Did you want to add something? This is the chair over at Community Council from Centennial. This is Virginia Allred.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I'm losing my voice, but there was just one thing that I wanted to point out. In all of those pictures that you looked at, there's no cars on the road, right? So when the kids are coming to school, keep in mind as you look at those pictures, you've got cars on both sides of the street, and sometimes doubled up. So, but mostly just at least if you just picture wall-to-wall cars, both sides of the street, all of that.
There was a video sent. Did that get, can you play that video? We had one mom, she videotaped during the rain this past week, the cars and the kids. If you could play that. Oh, this is the aerial view. This is a little bit later because he had to get to his, was it a soccer team? So this is a little bit later. So of course this is not as many cars as we usually have. This is just showing how narrow the strip of road gets right around. This is where, yes. This is farther south, down Sunset Road. He's just gonna come north. Okay, he's going south. I think he's coming up towards us. So the Sunset there is quite wide, which is totally great. We appreciate having that for the kids. And then as you get closer down to Centennial, see how the kids right there are walking along without sidewalks, so they're out in the road. But if we could get the white striping, you could see there, but it's faded at other places. Thank you, Andy. So there's the narrow strip, but we have the white line. Okay. All right, so this is a mom taking pictures along the road. This is where the kids usually walk. If we could get that expanded, there's 5 homes along this that don't have the expanded shoulder or the curb and gutter. And of course, they're driving really fast. Did you want that driver's or the license plate on that one? And they put the white lines exactly where there wasn't the curb and gutter over here, which we really appreciate. It's just, this is the amount of traffic that we're dealing with at 8 in the morning and at 3 in the afternoon. This is the mom that took the pictures. There's a couple of kids that, see, man, these guys are fast. I would totally get these license plates. I think she tells us that there's going to be some students passing. Maybe not. So if this is part of the expansion, if we could get this expanded, we could have some cars. This is just... All right, well, crossing on Smith, 1 sec. See, this is where the kids dart through. I think these kids cross Sunset right here too, because kids will be kids. See right there. See how they cross in between, so it's just...
And then a car comes around.
Anyways, I don't mean to take you guys just too much. I know it's valuable. If this is something that you guys would do, we'd really appreciate having that done. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Sarah, I know that you mentioned the Mrs. Robb and Mrs. Alberts and others who are here. Would you mind just standing so we can recognize everyone who is here from the community council and the school? All right, thank you very much. Thank you. I felt like this was a very insightful, beneficial meeting. I just maybe say one or two things and then maybe make an assignment. I do appreciate the options that you've given us. I also appreciate that you recognize the challenges that we have. I think shorter, long-term, our anticipation is to have improvements on all of Sunset, from Shepherd North all the way up to Wits End, which may take some time. Between now and August 24th, that obviously will not happen, and so the requests that you've made, to me at least, certainly seem reasonable. Councilmember Garn is our liaison for the school district as it relates to, for the school district and also our pedestrian, I'm trying to think exactly how it's worded, safety liaison. And so maybe Councilmember Garn could take what has been provided here and work with staff to maybe get us, I know that our Public Works Director and Andy were in the meeting on Tuesday, and this was very impressive to pull together in such a short amount of time, and drone footage to boot. That is a first. That was great. But maybe we could ask you to work with staff and come back to maybe a recommendation and a cost estimate to the council at our next meeting, if that's feasible.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do it, and I just want to say thank you for such an excellent presentation, and enjoyed the meeting very much too, looking at different options and understanding this city's budget constraints, but also just want to express how seriously I think we all take this, and to move forward as quickly as we can. But it's nice to have a few things that we can do right away while we're putting in place the ability to make more permanent and more extensive construction to make it a safer routes to school. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move into the rest, back into our agenda and continue our original or normal call to the public. And this is the time in the City Council meeting when we open the microphone to any of you that are in attendance that would like to address the City Council. If you're wishing to speak regarding one of tonight's agenda items and you haven't had the opportunity to do so, aside from item number 3, which we already held a public hearing on, this would be your opportunity to address the City Council regarding any of the other items or something that's not on the agenda that you'd like to provide feedback. As was indicated earlier, we do ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. Our city recorder keeps track of time, and when you hear the beeping, that's an indication your time has expired. So with that, we will open call to the public.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rustin Jessen, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Kaysville Memorial Day Committee. On Monday, the 29th, we'll be staging our 8th annual Memorial Day program up at the Kaysville City Cemetery. The program begins at 10 a.m. It includes participation by the Daviside Drumline, a flag ceremony and rifle volley salute by the American Legion Farmington Post 27, and our keynote speaker, Brigadier General D. Max Ewing. We'd like to extend an invitation to each of you on the council to join us at a position of honor up on the stage as we pay tribute to those who have fallen in service to this great nation. We'd also, I'd be remiss if I didn't extend an invitation to all Kaysville residents and really anyone who would like to join us in showing our appreciation for those who have paid that ultimate price for the freedoms we enjoy. Come for the program and plan an extra few minutes to walk around the cemetery where local Boy Scouts will be marking the monument of every veteran who lays to rest in our cemetery with an American flag. So plan a few extra minutes. So it's a great walk with your family to just kind of reflect on the day and what it means. And so we want to extend that invitation to you to join us. There will be a place at the stage for each of the council members if you would like to, and certainly let anybody know to join us up there for that day. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Rustin, for all of your efforts, and the committee. It's gone off without a hitch. Been a wonderful program for the past 8 years. Appreciate it. Any other items for call to the public?
I have to say this, it's not about what we talked about before, Sue Tice.
And I don't mean to offend anybody, but in fact, I am somewhat offended, and this has been going on for years, even when I was part of this situation, and that is the lack of separation of church and state, the prayer that starts your meetings. I am not a member of of the religion that offered the prayer. I do not believe in the same deity, and as such, you want to have an invocation, that's fine, but it should either be more secular or more universal, because that doesn't include us all, and we all live in this city.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. My name's Dean Wall, and I just have a couple of items. I just want to state my opinion of the city trying to get their own attorney. I still believe that contracting that out, at least to begin with, until we determine whether or not we can deal with a full-time attorney, because my time's not up, is it? Is that quick?
Sorry.
But that's just my concern. I think we ought to start with contracting it out, see where the money, how much money that costs us, and then if we can get into getting a full-time one, then I would more good. I know I disagree with the city managers and a couple other city councilmen, but that's my opinion. The other thing that I have is the Memorial Day is not just for those that gave their life in the service of the country, but those that served and later died. My dad was in World War II in the Navy, and he didn't die until 2010, but he still deserves that recognition too. But and then the other one, the main one I wanted to bring up is the mayor not running again.
Where do you get this information?
I don't know where you're getting this information from.
Well,
but regardless, any individual's political plans or futures wouldn't be appropriate for this meeting.
You're probably right, but I'm still going to give my opinion whether you like it or not. Okay, you've done a great job, and I would prefer to see you come back again. I know there's other reasonings, but that's my opinion. Okay, that's it.
Any other items for call to the public? All right, hearing none, we will close call to the public and move to the next item on our agenda, which is consideration of the vacation of 0.14 acres of right-of-way at 100 North Street at approximately 650 East. Mr. Thompson.
As we discussed earlier this evening in the public hearing, the property is located at the east end of 100 North. It's highlighted here on the map. The request is to vacate that unimproved portion of right-of-way in anticipation of development of some of the property that's adjacent to the right-of-way. I guess with what we had in the public hearing, the right-of-way would be proposed to be replaced with a private lane that configures better with the proposed development of the property. I think with that, we can let you go.
All right, with that informative staff report, I'll open to the council for discussion. I know the developer was here a few moments ago and was starting to address the council. We'd provide you that opportunity if you'd like to maybe speak to some of the comments that were shared in the public hearing, and then I'm sure the council will have some follow-up questions.
Again, my name is Spencer Prince. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to the council. I apologize for the false start, not knowing that. One of my partners who is an engineer, he apologizes for not being able to be here. He has a family medical emergency. But I just wanted to talk about our development. Andy, do you have the proposal, the way we're developing it? Okay. It's kind of light, but as I mentioned, the property is long and deep from north to south. Because of the width of the property, we did attempt to buy additional property, but we're not no one was interested in selling. And of course, that's their right to do so. But it allows, by putting in a private drive, it allows for enough depth to reach the mandatory setbacks for an R18 development. And of course, as you know, an R18 is 8,000 square feet. All of our lots are larger than 8,000 square feet and have quite large building pads. The building pads would not be filled with a home. They would be quite large if they were. So that is why we brought it down the west side of the property to talk about the issues that have been brought up. I wholly agree that Mr. Briggs should not be landlocked. That would not be right. If the road was developed all the way through to his property the way it originally was in the street right-of-way, for him to be able to do any development on his property, he would have to vacate the right-of-way anyway in his area because he does not have sufficient land to create an R18 lot on either side of it. So by vacating it would allow him to do development at any point that he wants. What we have done to treat that and have offered is that on the north side of the property, you can see that there's an easement. It's a 30-foot wide easement.
You want to give him a pointer?
Showing that.
There's a laser up there.
What's that?
A pointer on the podium if you want to.
Pointer on the podium.
Oh, you're kidding. Okay.
It's this parcel here.
Here we go. Okay, right here, that's the 30-foot easement here. And what we had proposed to Mr. Briggs is that we would build a 20-foot wide paved flag drive on the property. At the time that the subdivision is completed, then we would deed over the entire 30-foot easement to him so that he has sufficient land for that drive and also sufficient access. If the access is not sufficient where the creek is, that can either be remedied with the culvert itself or some additional property so that the 20-foot drive can go through there. But that is what we have offered. We firmly believe that he should have access. During our conversations, he indicated that he did not want to have to join a HOA in order to access the property, and he didn't want to drive on someone else's land. And so we came up with that proposal to handle that situation. Here where the property goes by Mrs. Taylor's home, we have bumped out the road so that it is 20 feet away from the house itself. We have offered to build a retaining wall here and then place a fence that matches the fencing on her home so that it keeps the privacy for her home. This design, keep the nearest that someone could build a home to her property is about 64 feet. So it keeps it well back rather than a side yard that in R18 you can build an 8-foot side yard next to a property line. As far as it was mentioned that there is a creek that is underground up here. That is the water issues that have been discussed. There are water issues on the property. One of them is that right here, tell them I'm a little nervous when I pointed that, but right next to the circle right here, there's about a 10-foot opening where the creek comes back out of the culvert and then passes through quite a fine grate. They're inch by inch and a half or something like that. Because that is open, it gathers leaves, and I've gone down to see it, and when the leaves back up on that grate, it tends to back up the creek. So we have proposed to the city and that creek be taken completely underground right into the storm drain and does not come above. So that would handle the issue from the backing up of the water here. As far as the water flooding to Mrs. Taylor's property, she has a storm drain here and a storm drain here. Currently, the city has a storm drain that connects to those two along a basin right here. By putting the road here, we're creating actually a physical barrier so that there would not be the ability of the water to get over to her property. Now, if groundwater comes up within her land, of course, we can't stop that because it is quite low, but we certainly can stop the water from coming off of our property. As you know, we are required by the city through engineering, and we would be hiring an engineering company to do so, to be able to handle any water on our property that comes from our property in a detention basin. And then, from what I understand, if any water comes off the vacant land here that's on the east, that is Mr. Briggs, because it is vacant, we need to engineer to handle that as well in our detention. Detention can be done a number of ways. One of my partners owns and develops hotels, and they do all kinds of detention basins for them, underground, above ground, and all of that. Of course, it would be based on engineering, and then it would have to be past the engineering requirements by the city. So what we anticipate is that the detention basin would be large enough to be able to handle the water issues that are flowing from our property or flowing from the vacant area on Mr. Briggs' property. Then it would have a backup system that it would, if should it overflow in a 100-year storm or something like that, then at a certain height, that would then go into the storm drain. If the city would like us to, or does not want us to, either way, we're okay with it. But this other storm drain that's right here that connects to an 18-inch pipe that goes through Mrs. Taylor's property, we can make that a third backup and have it higher than all three of them. If they do not want to have that because of the issues that are having, then we're fine designing it and engineering it so it does not have to be used on the property. We're very well aware and understand that anytime you make a development, if you've been on a quiet cul-de-sac, it's hard to think that there'll be additional cars. I think anyone in this room probably, if they had the choice to either have a home next to their home or a horse out in a pasture, would choose the horse out in the pasture. But we believe the Stewart family, the father had saved this land for his children, have some property rights to be able to sell it and to develop it. And so with the things that I've mentioned, we've tried to, also because this is a private lane, I currently live on a private drive. The speed limit is 10 miles an hour on our private lane, so it can be taken care of. It's not a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. And the people would be going slow as they come out. If they decided to speed on the city street, I can't stop that from happening. Are there any other questions that you have for me?
Questions from the council, the developer, or for staff?
Yeah. So, to me, first, maybe a comment. It seems like the key issue, completely agree that, as a property owner, you have a right. I believe the zoning is it already R18?
Correct.
So, it has a right to build on the property, but in order to make it work, you have to have this vacation of the right-of-way there, the city-owned property. And then clearly there are the, you know, one of the most important issues, I think, is that the development at the very least does not make the flooding situation worse for neighbors, so that it doesn't impact the neighbors. Some of the other issues, you know, I agree with your comment a little bit that, or all the way that, you know, as much as, I mean, I now have I used to have a field on the one side of my house, and now it's a Smith's development. It actually was not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but, you know, unless I was willing to buy that 17 acres, which of course I didn't have money to do, you know, I can't really prevent that from coming there. So as much as we'd like to have the fields, as you mentioned, that's not really an issue I think the council needs to consider. We definitely need to consider, though, the impacts on the neighbors of you know, doing this, and so we have maybe a little bit of leverage because of the, otherwise we wouldn't have any. I don't think the city council, you own the property, and as long as you meet all the codes and ordinances, then you could build there. But I guess the question, myself not being an expert on hydrology or drainage or developments, is do you feel like the improvements that, how would it impact the status quo of the issues, which apparently in that area there's already some water issues? How would that impact? And then don't want to add too many questions, but the other question would be, as far as the right-of-way to the adjoining property not being landlocked, maybe again working that out or knowing exactly what the best option is would be helpful as well. So those are the two issues I see, as the flooding and the landlocked issue. So how would the development impact flooding? Would it actually improve it, keep it the same, or how would, in your view, with your, I understand your engineer's not here, but how do you think that impacts that situation?
I think as far as the impact on the neighborhood, it would have a positive impact, negating the issues that have been had by the neighborhood with the flooding, because all of the water from the property or that comes onto the property is directed towards detention basins and reservoirs, so that it's not running down through someone's property. I am not an engineer. My partner is, but we will also be hiring an engineer to do the engineering to make sure that it meets the city standards. And we can't develop unless we meet those city standards and make sure that we have mitigated any water issues from our property, or as I mentioned, from the vacant property to the east. As far as did that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman. I should be referring to you that way. Also, as far as the access to the property, we feel that by providing the land and deeding it over so that he has ownership, does not have to buy, and it's a significant amount of land, does not have to buy does not have to drive on someone else's property, does not have to buy the property, and then also paving the actual drive that crosses it. We feel that we've provided an excellent access to the property. Currently, he has no access to the property. There are fences that cross everywhere along there, and the flag drive would allow full access to it. That doesn't mean that he needs to develop his property now. He's told me that he may develop it, may never develop it, but it does provide that if he ever does want to develop it, he has a current a way to get there and is not obstructed. And by the road itself going across that area that is low, you know, it does the same thing that we're talking about with the water issue. So we feel like this design can actually handle the water issue better than otherwise would be.
Just to be clear, would you mind, Andy, maybe going back to the picture that shows the easement outlined, and each picture has its own purpose, I guess, but, so the easement is in the blue, is that
Right,
correct?
yes.
Yeah, this is the easement that crosses our property. This is the easement that crosses Mr. Briggs' property. It dead ends here where it runs into the home. The extension of that easement was vacated some time ago, and everything east of there's no drive at all. My comment that what I said with this amount of property here, or the amount of property that he owns here, it's about up to here. I've just got basic estimates, but it's 6,534 square feet on the south of the drive or easement, and on the north it's 5,227. So in order to be able to develop in the future, should he decide to do that, he would need to vacate the land there, the same thing that we are requesting, in order to have sufficient land to be able to do any development. Of course, he has use of the land either way.
Thank you. Would you mind pointing to where the access point off the private lane would be?
Yes, the access point of our private lane, or of his?
To get to his property.
Okay. The access point of his private lane would be right here, and then it would be a 30-foot easement, so it would essentially take in where the barn is here, and then the pavement portion, which is required 20 feet, is it not, Andy? The pavement portion would be paved along that boundary so that there's 20 feet, and of course you have to have gravel under that and build it so that it supports the requirements there. But that's where it would be, and I wish I could hold it a little more still, but it's essentially 30 feet from this property line that would be deeded over, and then the road would be built on it.
Okay, so, and maybe it's a question for Andy. So are we vacating everything that's in blue, or just the portion of blue that's within the yellow?
The request is just to vacate the portion of blue that's in the yellow. We would recommend that if you vacate that we vacate the other parcel as well, because you don't want a isolated piece of right-of-way that we don't even have access to ourselves.
Right, and so the two pieces of property, and I forgot, I'm terrible with names, that
Briggs.
Mr. Briggs owns, to get, if the drive access is on this north side, he would then have access across the other portion vacated to his other property?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all of my questions.
Thank you. Any other questions that I can answer from the council?
Any other questions from the council?
Mr. Prince, you have indicated that there are 5 building lots. Is that
Yes.
correct? You're proposing 5 building
That's
lots.
correct.
On, what's the total acreage?
The total acreage, including the right-of-way, is 1.33 acres. Lot number 1, now this, it would be smaller than this because of if we deed that over, but lot number 1 right now is 14,165 feet, or 0.33 acre. Lot number 2 is 9,744 square feet, or 0.22 acre. Lot number 3, I'm sorry, I'm going from this direction here. Lot number 3 is here, is 10,226 square feet, or 0.23 acre. Then lot number 4 is 11,230 square feet, or 0.26 acre. And then lot number 5 is a little bigger. There's a Hates Creek easement that goes along here that's 15 feet. So that property is 12,402 square feet, or 0.28 acre. So that's the acreage that we have for each of those.
Right. So all 5 lots are in excess, quite in excess of 8,000 square feet.
That's correct. The one that's the closest is 9,744 square feet.
Which is, I had to do math in public, but almost 25% larger than the 8,000 square feet that you're anticipating.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that. I think the rendering that I've got, I use your,
Yeah, it doesn't have sense.
the
One that
rendering
went
I've
in
got
the
in the
packet
packet is
was different.
different.
At the time when that was sent out, he was still negotiating and determining which alignment he felt was best. At this point, this is what he prefers.
Okay. And what you've got is this private drive that accesses along the western edge of the property,
Correct.
all 5 lots, is that correct?
It terminates right here. It goes down here where it comes close to the house, it bumps out, goes around, and then comes down here and goes into the circle. We originally had proposed bringing it right along the property line and had hoped to do that. The reason for that, it makes the building pad larger. It's still sufficient, but the building pad larger, that was not, Mrs. Taylor did not want that to happen. And so rather than create issues with it, we decided to just go ahead and change that and show that it bumps out and goes out and around and meets the requirements of staying 20 feet away from a home to a private drive. Am I speaking loud enough for everybody here? Okay.
For me, anyway. The only other question, I guess, Andy, I'll direct this one to you with regard to the water issues. I mean, what do you see as the primary driver? We've heard a lot in the public hearing about significant flooding in the area and issues with that. I think even Mr. Tice has been up to his hips or something like that recently. Anyway, what is the primary driver of that flooding, and would this development with the piping of the creek in its entirety and removing that culvert and all that, would that actually help improve the drainage in the area? Or from an engineering estimate, what is your estimation on that?
Again, it's just my estimation at this point because the engineering has not been done. Certainly would be required before a final plat approval would be given.
Yep.
The source of the flooding appears to be from a couple things. One is it's an open ditch, so it collects debris and then plugs, and that was expressed tonight. A lot of it is just plugging of the grate. If the ditch is piped, the debris no longer has an opportunity to get in and the water is able to flow much freer. Surface water, as was mentioned, you put a road in that collects the water on the surface and directs it to the storm drain so it doesn't go where it's not supposed to. And then again, of course, he would have to do all the calculations and show us that the pipes were sized adequately, detention was appropriate for the amount of water that reaches that area.
Okay. You're confident that it can be done from an engineering perspective, it can be done to accommodate the flooding, actually to improve potentially the flooding?
I'm confident that it can be done. I'm not 100% confident that he can afford to do it all.
Fair enough.
The zoning right now as it stands, if the request for the right-of-way is are we also looking at a zone change or amendment from what's being requested?
This is an R18 zone. Because it's a private lane, it would require the PRUD overlay zone. That's scheduled with the Planning Commission for next week, pending the outcome of tonight. Typically, the City Council doesn't see that overlay zone until at least final plat approval.
I guess the question I have, if it's, that has a private lane, and I'm assuming, or I'm guessing that the reason why we're even talking about vacating this is because with this installation, it doesn't serve a purpose. But if we were just to go off, I don't know if it's perception or consistency and not vacate it, does the development, can it still happen with 4 lots? Is that what causes the city?
If we don't vacate the right of way, he could extend the road within the existing right of way. It would likely be a public street at that point, since it's in public right of way currently. And then he would have to determine how to serve the property. Potential for a couple of flag lots to come off of it. 2 lots fronting the street and flag lots coming in the back. The properties to the north do not contain 8,000 square feet in either case. And so they're essentially remnant parcels without the vacation of the road.
I see. So the owners here and here really wouldn't have an option. They're not asking for one either, but they wouldn't have an option, it sounds like.
Yes, they could be sold to adjacent properties to the east if that was the choice, but when we vacate a road under state law, the abutting property owners each get half the road. In this case, the same owner owns both sides of the road, so it would just make this yellow piece all one piece and Mr. Briggs' piece all one piece there as well.
Then my other question was, this is kind of my water, thank you. Some fireworks for you. This is kind of a wannabe cul-de-sac, not really a real cul-de-sac.
Technically, it's a temporary turnaround because the right-of-way extended. We didn't put a permanent cul-de-sac there. It's just a temporary turnaround at this point.
My point would be if the council did consider vacating this road, this then becomes the end of the road, as it were. Who then has the responsibility to make it a full cul-de-sac?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that right now. We'd have to determine that.
I mean, so that would be at least something if the council wanted to. It looks like you've got might have some right-of-way issues, but I know this is kind of a sort of works, but doesn't really. My at least initial thinking would be if you were going to end the city street here, the reason why this did what it did is because it was anticipated to carry on. If you were going to vacate, it would seem like for the city to vacate it and just deed it over, and then for the city to turn around and take responsibility to eventually make all of these improvements and make it an appropriate or an sufficient cul-de-sac on the city's dime would seem counterproductive.
That's a fair point.
And then my other question was, there's been a fair amount of representations made as far as being able to address this. It's one of those things that I don't know where the council is leading. If the council's considering vacating this land, I don't know what the statute says, if that vacation can be tied to some type of development agreement or agreements, because I would like to see if the city is considering vacating the cul-de-sac improvements addressed, and then some contractual commitments made to address the water. Just taking action to vacate now and giving it away without, with intent. And quite honestly, you seem very reasonable, but it's one of those things that sometimes you say, well, we all thought we knew what we were getting and what was being addressed. It almost feels like that vacation. If the council has no interest, then maybe it's a moot point. If there's some consideration, it almost feels like that vacation should be associated with some agreements, maybe in the form of a development agreement or something else, but just to vacate it and not have some written assurances would seem a little cart before the horse to me.
We would certainly be open to that. I understand what you're saying, and it needs to be done right. And then quite frankly, we cannot get final plat until we have a plan that is sufficient to take care of the issues that we've discussed. Now, that circle, most of the improvements are in. There's a storm drain grate in it. There's a fire hydrant, but I don't know what else is required. But that's where it enters the private drive, and it can, we have to make that work between the two. We also have a turnaround up in our property as well. And I understand what you're saying.
The reason why I ask about the cul-de-sac issue is there are several dead-end streets that have no cul-de-sac at the end around town, and the anticipation is that those will connect. In some cases, they may not, and are we opening ourselves up to say, on all of those, we'll just vacate the right-of-way, not require a street, do a public drive, and then have a non-cul-de-sac cul-de-sac. And so I think that's something. And then the ordinance, at least that's being proposed by the council, doesn't have any subjects to, any language to say subject to, so rather it was subject to a final plat approvals. You know, again, maybe that's cart before the horse, but it just feels like there's some other missing things. But it'd be nice to know if the council has leaning one way or another. Well, and I guess the reason why I say that is even if you are leaning one way or another, in my opinion, I think we're probably a little soon to just grant the vacation tonight without any of those terms clearly written out. That being said, it would also be unfair to ask the developer to go and staff to put that language together in some kind of an agreement, like a development agreement, if the council has no interest in vacating it whatsoever. So maybe need to get some some feeling of where the council is.
Well, Mayor, I think the answer to this is, well, first of all, the issues we have is water and access, and I think that the developers made an effort to address both of these. And just like Andy was saying, before a plot or a subdivision is approved, that water situation has to be fixed, and to the satisfaction of the engineers and everyone else. And I guess that's the risk that Mr. Prince has to deal with.
Yes.
I think that the best way to handle this is approve it on a condition that it doesn't go into effect or it doesn't transfer until the final subdivision or plat or whatever it's worked out to be is actually approved. So that way, if we never come to a meeting of minds and it's not approved by the city council, it's not transferred. And I think that that's probably the best way. I have a hard time wanting to transfer that over when we don't know if it's even going to be a viable subdivision. It needs to go through the process. Engineering needs to go through. All these things need to be accomplished first. And we need to protect the rights of the citizens in that area and everything else, and the process needs to go forward. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I know we can debate this, but you know, we're not here to debate a subdivision tonight. That's not what we're here for. It's to talk about the vacation of the property. So I would actually make a motion that we approve the vacation of the portion of 100 North Main Street, or North Street, 100 North Street, and include that as well as Mr. Briggs' land as well as one thing, on condition that the final subdivision or plat is approved by the city council. And that's the condition. So it wouldn't be transferred, it wouldn't be recorded until it's a done deal.
I'll second that.
I think we have a motion by Council Member Page and a second by Councilmember Lee as outlined. Do you have additional comment, Mr. Garn?
Yeah, just a question, actually. Maybe this is unnecessary, but if the motion maker and second consider possibly also the access issue, and I don't know where it would be, in the development agreement or some separate agreement, but that also be completed, because I get your point and I completely agree with it, that it doesn't make any sense to vacate the easement if the subdivision for whatever doesn't go through. Then you would need that easement for some other type of different, configuration or whatever of the development in the future. So completely agree with that. I just wondered if we wanted to also address the access in that, or if that's even necessary.
Or I guess maybe that's a question we could ask Andy. I think that would be a part of the subdivision or the plot, but they're going to decide on that. Is that correct?
As it's currently presented, he's shown that as part of the subdivision plan. So I think that probably is implied that that's got to be addressed as well.
I have one maybe just reservation with the motion that I'd like to at least express. What you also have in your packet is an ordinance with specific language regarding the vacation. The motion, I think, would essentially be directing staff to try and inject modified language into the ordinance that's before you that would ultimately be considered by the city council tonight. And sometimes, as we've talked about, those working documents to say, we're going to make a motion for you to adopt this document, just add this word, and then these words and intent, and you're good to go. My gut would tell me that even tabling it to our next meeting and allowing the appropriate language so it's very clear and concise be put into the ordinance that we're adopting, and instead of, because I think the action that staff will take is, well, this is the ordinance that they passed and we need something subject to these certain things. I realize that may be a time delay for the developer, but it would almost feel better. Again, it's one of those things that maybe I talk too much for not having a vote, but it would almost feel better to have that language in there so it's very clear on what's being adopted and would cost 2 weeks. But
Could I ask something?
yes.
We would be happy to have it subject to the language that the city would provide, because essentially it's saying the development has to be done correctly, the water issues have to be done, and so forth. And if we don't make it to your liking as a council, it's not going to pass no matter when it happens. So I'm okay with that.
There's probably maybe the confusion, at least for me, is and maybe something I should have caught, but the agenda item that we have is consideration of the vacation of 0.14 acres of right-of-way on 100 North Street at approximately 650 East. Including the council packet is an ordinance that describes the vacation. So I think technically if the motion is to move forward with those negotiations, then great. If the motion is to adopt an ordinance vacating, then that's where I feel like we're lacking a little bit. And maybe in the agenda item, we should have been clear that the purpose of this tonight is adoption of an ordinance to vacate. And so that's where I guess I'm saying maybe the two don't mesh real well.
And I would just comment that I completely see your point, Mayor, and I agreed 100% when you first said it, but as I thought about it a little bit, there's a principle involved. So then there's semantics, like there's the exact language. And as a matter of process, I completely agree that generally you want to be voting on the exact language, but I think we would have an opportunity in the future when we're considering, and maybe that would be the thing to do, is to review the next time it comes before the city, rather than to delay for 2 weeks progress on moving forward, to actually have a part of that to review the language. And as long as it meets the intent of, because I think it's fairly clear what it is we're stating here, and the language would be fairly simple, I'm willing to trust that, upon review, that the language would not, would be amended appropriately, I guess.
May I suggest that you proceed with the motion on the table and add to that you direct staff to prepare the ordinance for review at the next meeting? So we vacate the street tonight and prepare the ordinance as the next step in the process. That gives Mr. Prince the assurance he needs now, and it gives you the opportunity to review the exact language of the ordinance.
Is the street vacated without?
Makes sense.
Is the street vacated without the ordinance?
No.
Well, they moved to vacate it, but it's not technically vacated until we do it by ordinance.
So we're going to make a motion to
Speculation.
to plan to do something that we're not actually going to do.
So do we
Well,
amend?
but the motion is not to vacate the property tonight anyway, because there's a contingency attached.
That's right.
So you could also have the contingency attached that, subject to the review at the next meeting of the ordinance language. Why couldn't that as well be a condition?
It could, but the ordinance is the document.
Yeah.
That
I do understand what you're saying.
And that's back to that original point is the ordinance is the document and currently lacks specificity of what it is we're supposed to be doing.
Where's a city attorney?
And
You need one.
and portion is misspelled.
And portion is misspelled.
Porton of 100 North Street.
Porton. Who owns the land now? The Smiths or the Prince family?
Stewart family are the ones that are selling it to us. We have it under contract.
They have it under contract with
Yes.
contingency, I imagine. under contract with contingency that this all goes through, I would imagine?
Yeah, there's escrows and all of that, yes.
And the land, we're just vacating an easement, right? We don't own the easement, we're just vacating the easement.
We're vacating right-of-way. It's public right-of-way,
So it's
owned by
technically
the city.
property, deeded property
Yes.
to us. So it's not something that needs to go up for a public auction?
No.
Give other people a chance to bid, because it
Public
has to
right-of-way
be
is
adjacent owners.
defined in state code, how you vacate a street and the process that's required.
It has to be split to the adjacent.
That's correct.
Okay. Another question. A couple weeks ago, we instituted somewhat of a new program of a 500-foot radius. How many folks here live beyond a 500-foot radius, would you say, of this, or close to 500 feet of this project? You guys are the epicenter. Is there anybody a little further out?
What was the question, sorry?
So we instituted a program in our notification process, somewhat, that we're now going to get a little more aggressive about notifying folks about things that are changing in the city.
More so than just the yellow sign at the cul-de-sac?
Exactly. Now, we've had in place, to my knowledge, some mailers, but we haven't quite had stipulations on where those mailers should go. There's been times when the mailers have gone to one resident and a government entity, and that's really the only one I know. So we're trying to see those mailers go to a 500-foot minimum radius. So I'm glad the epicenter is here. And for me, I got to hear from more people, because we've just put this program in place. I'm a little reluctant. I personally have visited this property. Surprisingly, it's on the agenda now for other reasons. Is there a geotechnical report done on the property?
That has to be done for the development.
Right.
And we're also putting in, I neglected to mention, land drains for the homes as well.
So you have, Andy, they have an outlet for land drain?
They would have to chase down the storm drain until it met appropriate grade.
Okay. Just, given what the folks have said here tonight about the amount of water issues, I've personally seen them and studied them, ironically, just a little bit, if my Google Doc will pull up here. Let's see. There we go. Informal. Oh, that's an outdated one. Okay, so this is, I got a spreadsheet here of many, many projects. Your project, the city spent 100 north, 600 east, right? Okay, we spent, I think it's around 2015. Hold on, I think the spreadsheet has dates. You remember the crews being up there? Yep. I'm a former pipe layer, excavation contractor. And so we spent, hold on, it was like 30 projects in this spreadsheet. Let me get back to you. So we spent $30,000, $31,000, roughly, when we were up there, according to what I've, was what received. And that doesn't quite include all of the city overhead to go with it. So you definitely have water issues, undoubtedly. And I've actually been up there and witnessed them. So I don't know. It's kind of a tough one. I get a lot of the sentiment of the folks here. I hate to see it keep going. There's also property rights. I also want to be very transparent. Are you the Prince family that used to be in cabinetry?
Yes.
Okay, so we do have somewhat of a...
I was not the owner of that company.
Okay.
I owned a separate one.
I have to disclose, I do have my wife, her cousin is married to a nephew of yours, I believe. So maybe your son, I think a nephew. Just to throw that out there so there's no conflicts coming at me later.
I wasn't aware of that, by the way.
Yeah, no problem. It's more on my end. We have obligations to disclose anything of a conflicting nature. So those are some of my concerns. I'd like to see more people notified. I grew up in the industry, and so I saw a lot of money spent before contracts were ever closed on developments. Contingencies were always put in place, but I saw a lot of geotechnical money get spent, at full risk. So I would think some geotech work needs to happen up in there. We need to find out soils, we need to find out what might happen to these guys. They've been flooding out repeatedly. That's why the city went up on their own dime, spent $30,000 up there. So I'm a little reluctant at this point.
Thank you. As your motion still stands, so we do have a motion to approve the vacation. It wasn't specific to adopt the ordinance, but to approve the vacation. You want to keep that motion as is currently?
Well,
Subject to conditions.
well, subject to that it's approved. So it won't change unless the subdivision's approved.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Councilmember Garn, will you start a vote?
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
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 Thank you. The motion carries 4-1. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Next on our agenda is award of bid for 200 North and Angel Street project. Mr. Thompson?
I think you're all aware that we've been working on the 200 North and Angel Street project for some time now. It's been designed and put out for bid. We received bids a week or two ago. Received only 3 bids. The summary was given in your packet. The lowest bid was to Staker Parsons Companies in the amount of $2,442,000. Just quickly to outline the project. The project is to put a traffic signal at the intersection of 200 North and Angel Street. The black lines are areas that will receive improvement along the south side of 2nd North. We primarily just curb and gutter. There'll be some sidewalk placed here where there's already curb and gutter, and then full improvements on the other areas that are outlined. We'd like to have done full improvements on all the areas. Many of the property owners on the south side are not quite ready for that yet. And so we pulled the sidewalk off. That also allows us to do some other review for potential active transportation programs in the future that could connect up to the rail trail. At this point, we're expecting that it'll be built wide enough to accommodate full build out at 5 lanes. It'll likely just be striped at 3 lanes under initial construction. Based on where the bridge is at, it's probably not going to be done this summer, so this would be striped at 3 lanes. There's accommodations made at the intersection to also accommodate bicycle lanes in the future. So we're looking at those type of aspects. That's all included in the current bid that you see before you. So we believe that's a reasonable bid. It's within the range of the budget. It's about $100,000 over the engineer's estimate. Some of that will be paid back by the development of properties that are under development currently. Some of these items are beyond what we needed to, but felt like it was better to put those in up front rather than, even though it's easier, it's not that much fun to tear up brand new asphalt to put new utilities in. So we've got agreement with Destination Homes up here to put certain utilities in, and they'll pay us back. We've got a similar agreement with Adams Company, Terra Venture, I believe is how they own that property, to put certain utilities in. Otherwise, the rest of the stuff is part of this project. So we'd recommend that we award the bid to Staker Parsons Company in the amount listed on the bid tabulation.
And we will at least have a sidewalk on the north side of the road.
The complete sidewalk from, well, all the way from Flint Street to Angel Street at the completion of this project on the north side.
And including this leg that'll tie it in. The idea was to
Yes.
service the elementary school, and that will accomplish that. And then initially, are they planning to have this be a summer project so that we were hoping to have this completed by the time school starts, which evidently is August?
Yes, we're still finalizing some of the right-of-way on the south side. But we expect them to start within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
No, this has been a long process. Well, I take that back. I know it's been a time-consuming process, but the fact that we're to this point and only
We're still
6
about
months
2
ago,
years ahead of
7 months
schedule.
ago, yeah, is pretty impressive.
It is. And they are projecting to be done with the project by the time school starts, or by this season?
I think the bulk of the major work will be done by the time school starts. There may be some finish work done after the end of August, but
And any traffic signals that are installed, can we get them delivered so that Southern Utah doesn't steal them again like they did on Flint Street? And
we can only get silver ones in that time frame.
Flint Street was completed, done, but then some other cities stole our lights, and so we were like 3 months without it being done because we didn't have traffic signals. So a little bitter about that still, apparently.
How are the negotiations coming along with the owners of the frontage? And if I could ask, is there any frontage owners here?
There are a couple, yes.
How are the negotiations coming along there? And I'll defer to the mayor, but I imagine they would appreciate it.
We've had appraisals done on all the properties. Some of the owners disagreed with that appraisal. They've appealed to the state ombudsman, who has ordered another appraisal. They'll then compare those, and ultimately the ombudsman kind of says this is what they believe it should be. If that's agreeable to everybody, that's what we do. If they don't agree, it can go to court. But with that ombudsman's analysis, that's usually fairly binding.
And I think Councilmember Adams' question too, it sounds like the remaining negotiations or questions are on the south side of Angel Street.
Yes.
If they were not able to be resolved, at that point, would we consider a change order to just not improve the south side of the street? And
that's an option. I would prefer not to do that, but it could be considered.
This is a project that is very well needed, very much needed.
That's for sure.
And we're excited that we've been able to actually escalate the timing of the project.
And it's also being paid by 90% other people's money.
Right. That's huge. So I'll make a motion that we approve and award the bid for the construction to Staker Parson for the Angel Street and 200 North intersection.
I'll second that.
a motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Page for approval as outlined. Any further discussion? I just want to mention Councilmember Adams just made an inquire or a comment about those in attendance. Those in attendance did not take the opportunity to speak in the public comment. Is there any of the adjacent property owners that we've discussed that have a burning desire to make a brief comment before the council takes action? You don't even have to have a burning desire, just a regular desire would even be. All right. Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. Councilmember Adams?
I'd like to make an alternate motion that, until there's satisfactory acceptance with these folks, we need to have some kind of a clause in moving forward. They've been out there for a long time, probably longer than any of us have been in town, and I'd just like to see them treated fairly and not have them end up in an imminent situation. So, they're giving up a lot too, and, we're gonna gain quite a bit by them doing that. I'd like to see them treated, more than fairly, so.
So fortunately, you were the first to vote after I'd called for a vote, but it sounds like you just made a substitute motion. And would you clarify what that is?
110% as my voice conveys, so you'll have to bear with me.
So I gathered your motion, you were offering a substitute motion to approve the contract subject to, maybe you could clarify that part?
Yes, substitute motion that we do go ahead and approve it. It's a very dangerous intersection, and I hate to hold up construction season, but that we have a contingency in there that we will be fair with the folks who have been here longer than all of us. So a contingency that we will make sure that there's a fair remedy and a fair negotiation with the folks that are losing their frontage. I think some of them are losing their whole driveway, just about, so.
I think we have a substitute motion as outlined. Maybe just one point of clarification, if the approval is to approve the contract with I just forgot the name of the contractor.
Staker.
Staker. Thank you, Staker Parsons. Is the motion approval of the contract subject to treating, I'm not sure that the contingency could be applied to the contract, since we're approving the contract with Staker, but the contingency of fairness would be applied to the property owner. But maybe it just, does that make sense? I just ask it.
I'll give you background. I've had this issue raised to me for the past 5 months via email from several different folks. Received phone calls again tonight. So they some just don't quite feel like yet that there's fairness being brought to the table on the city side, which, you know, we've got to watch out for the taxpayers too. But they've been here a long time. They're giving up a lot. I think it's just important somehow we put an addendum in there that we will honor them. I've heard around $5 a foot. Is that what we're offering them, Shane?
I don't know. That's about what the appraisal came in, is about $550.
$5.50 a foot. So
I might be off by a few cents, but.
I feel like it's too bad I didn't get a chance to hear from those owners themselves, that I haven't been privy to emails or phone calls, but I certainly think that would be nice, so.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with the sentiment at all, and certainly we always want to be fair. There's a process in place generally to, and now the ombudsman is in place, and so I certainly think that we need to consider that at this point. But to the mayor's question, the only thing I would say is right now, we're approving the low bid responsive contract. We're not necessarily dealing with this issue, so I don't see the utility in attaching the awarding of the contract to the low bidder to what we do in fairness to property owners who are losing some of their frontage. So I just don't see that the two things are related, but I certainly don't disagree with the sentiment to address that at the appropriate time.
I can absolutely understand and appreciate that, and I would kind of relate it to the motion that we just passed on that subdivision. You watch now, the horses to the water. That subdivision's going to happen, essentially. When things start marching down the road, they don't turn back. So I'm just saying, I'd like to put some kind of fail-safe in there. I'm not an expert in this area and don't claim to be. I'm not an attorney. But I'd like to make sure these folks are treated fairly. Once this project is approved, it will happen. And they will have no more leverage.
I don't disagree with that. I think there's also absolute, I think fairness is implied, and I think that the process for acquiring right-of-way is being followed, where the ombudsman is involved, and heaven forbid it ever had to get to I'm not even sure it would ever get to that point with regard to, eminent domain and whatnot. There still have to be compensated at fair market value according to appraisals of the property. And I don't even want to get to that direction, because ideally we'd be able to negotiate with the property owners and be able to acquire the right of way. Yes, it's a change for them, but it is a street that is 200 North is absolutely needed and to be widened and fully improved, and it's necessary for the entire community, especially out west. So. I think fairness is implied, fairness of treatment for them is implied in that, and in the access of, or the acquiring of right-of-way. But, again, I still think we need to move forward with awarding the contract and get this project underway.
So I started recognizing Councilmember Adams' substitute motion, and I failed to call for a second to the substitute motion. Is there a second to the substitute motion as outlined? All right, hearing no second to the substitute motion, we'll revert back to the original motion as made, and we will call for a vote. Councilmember Lee, will you start a vote, please?
Aye.
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 Same thing happened on the south end of Angel. We went in and started, and now the neighbors are just fit to be tied. It's a nay.
Thank you.
This should be taken care of beforehand.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-1. Next item on our agenda is discussion of sale of city property at approximately 400 East Oak Lane. Mr. Thompson.
Several years ago, Kaysville City acquired a piece of property from the Kaysville Irrigation Company. The property is located off Oak Lane at about 400 East. Includes all this property here. It was an old reservoir that the irrigation company used for years. Once the pressure irrigation system was installed, the need for this reservoir essentially went away. It served basically the old part, the old town site here, the square blocks west of Main Street. That was all served by pressure irrigation, so that reservoir kind of use was no longer needed by the irrigation company. Kaysville City looked at it and said, we've already got a dam here. It would be an excellent place to do some stormwater detention for that stream that runs through Happy Hollow, and it also splits and runs down parallel to Crestwood Road. They come together just in this area and come into here. We've had some minor flooding problems downstream of that, so that was acquired the intent of cleaning up the reservoir area and putting detention in it. I haven't quite got all the way through that yet, but it functions to some degree now. There is property west of the dam that was owned by the irrigation company and acquired in the purchase, that we now have an offer from an adjacent property owner requesting to purchase that from the city. We also have some consideration from other adjacent property owner that they might have interest in some portion of it as well. Those two parties have been brought together to discuss that outside of here. The indications I've received is that they've made an agreement and they're both fine with what can happen. One will buy it and sell it to the other, as I understand it. However, before we go there, we've reviewed the state statute and the city ordinance regarding disposal of property. For real property of this size, there is no official process outlined. The state allows us to determine what is a significant piece of property. Our ordinance says a significant parcel of property is 5 acres or larger. This is about a 1/3 acre that's being requested to buy. So the purpose tonight is we have received an offer to purchase. We would like to ask you what process you would like us to go through as far as notification to other property owners, as far as bidding the property, or do we just take the offer that we have on the table and negotiate it and bring it back to you when we're done? So I don't have any prices for you or any of that kind of stuff at this point, but we're just asking for direction of how you'd like the staff to proceed with this offer.
Okay, just a question, Andy. So, oh, this is dead almost. Is yours better?
There you go.
I think so.
All right. Yeah, it's green, that's why. Okay, this is the person here that's, that wants to purchase it then?
Yes, sir.
I notice he's building a new home. This is the person over here, I guess, that inquired about it, and I guess what, these two people talked?
That's what I've been told, yes.
Okay. I guess the question, this right here is private property as well. I guess there's a home right here, and they own down in the hollow. Is that right?
That'd be correct, yeah.
I'm just wondering if fairness would be to present to this landowner and this landowner as well, because it does attach to his back. I mean, I just don't see where this land to be a benefit to anybody else because it's landlocked and nobody can get to it. Now, there's a dam, I guess, what, right here along this edge?
Yes,
okay.
That's correct.
Okay, so the city's not anticipating or selling any of this property because they're using it for water retention, is that correct? Okay. I don't know. I just think maybe not a bad process to, you just hate to sell it and then all of a sudden you have people that attach to it and say, well, we didn't know anything about it. I think maybe it might not be a bad thing to contact this landowner and this landowner as well. If what's your plan on doing, and if they have any interest, and I think that's probably the fair thing to do. I mean, that's my opinion.
Doesn't our purchasing policy have surplus property procedures?
Yes.
Maybe we could just follow those. I think it's an auction process.
For less than 5 acres of property, it does not outline a process.
But regular surplus property procedures would say the council declares it surplus, And then we have a variety of options that we can use to sell it, which is trying to get the most bang for our buck. So if that's putting it on a website, if that's listing it elsewhere, we could do that. I think Councilmember Page makes the same argument that we made, which is I'd hate to see somebody that isn't one of these property owners come in here and purchase this property speculatively or otherwise, and then they're landlocked, or then they control this area, which may not be appropriate for anybody but that doesn't live there. So
Could I ask about that? Because this is a public street
Yeah.
that runs right into the property.
Yeah.
The property's not landlocked, and it's a third of an acre. And I know that we're saying that a significant parcel is 5 acres, but a third of an acre is not insignificant, and it would at least appear developable.
it does have some challenges vertically, but you're right. It's got
Yeah, but I'm just, and then I guess the other question is, our remaining parcel is now landlocked, if we sell that, or so, whatever that process is would have to include.
We'd have to include all the appropriate easements, yes.
An easement and paved access or some kind of access, or maybe our existing access, because it seems like at the end of this street, it comes over this property line with some kind of something so that we're allowed to get in there.
There's a dam above this?
Do you have a view, a satellite view?
How do we
No, I
service it?
didn't, the photos weren't showing up
Are
good.
we losing our access?
it's very steep.
There's no sewer down.
Where does the slope begin after the street there?
The way he's got it drawn here on his request, he's got it basically at the west top edge of the dam, which we need to discuss as staff and decide if we want to move that line down to the bottom of the dam, which is kind of what I'm leaning towards, but we haven't done any of that type of negotiation yet. Be more comfortable, and we kept property off the end of the road all the way across the dam. That might be a thought as well.
Is this platted this way, or is this just a line we drew?
It's my best estimate of what he
It's all one parcel
requested.
right now.
So someone needs to pay the expense to subdivide and plat and survey.
It would have to be
and-
subdivided, yes, and surveyed and determine exactly what we were willing to sell.
What is the, well, I was gonna say, I guess we're not in negotiations, maybe I can't answer that, but, yeah. But at some point, I think it would be valid to know what, especially, and then maybe just notification. I know that, at least from what I've heard from staff, this negotiation is taking place with this property owner here, and then we've been informed that these folks are working with them, but without a specific, I think it was, Shane, did you mention that just a minute ago, or maybe it was Larry or Chris, I can't keep you all straight, specifically reaching out by letter or personally to this person, this person, this person, this person, and maybe even this person, just to make them aware. I have no reason to not suspect that what's being represented there is accurate, but just from a due diligence standpoint, at a minimum, I feel like we would need to say, hey, so you're aware, and maybe that's the process. I think what you're asking is, what do you want us to do?
You're asking for direction.
Yeah.
If you don't want to sell it, we're not going to do any of those things. So if you're okay to sell it, I think those are
Well, I think it's
really good suggestions.
arbitrarily selecting who we sell it to that's the issue.
Right.
I think it needs to be.
We want to be open.
Open
Yep.
on the website, everyone gets a shot.
Yep.
Why is it our business where the land is? It's not our land, it's the tax holder's land.
So just a question, looking at this access, because I didn't notice that before, and when Councilman Page, when you were mentioning, that makes perfect sense, because the only possible use would be the adjoining property owners could expand their lot size, right? I mean, and you wouldn't, and in that scenario, it would also make sense to have the access or right-of-way easement to the dam for the city across a property like that, that's not going to have an additional home built on it or something like that. But when, Mayor Hyatt, you pointed out this road, what is this road? Obviously, this is a house right here, right?
It is.
And so that's a public street right there, not
It is.
private? It goes all the way to the subject property?
It does.
So what is the impediment to, why would it, what's the challenge? You mentioned a challenge.
It's mostly just a hole, for lack of a better word. It's just a tremendous vertical drop.
Oh, the property itself, not the road
Yes.
to it. but
That's
the-
why I think it would be best to see it on a,
So you'd
aerial
have to bring in
photo.
an awful lot of fill, I guess.
Coming up as fast.
nothing's impossible, but
Like Fifth East.
Can you put it up on Google, Andy?
I'm-
We'll get a better view.
It's coming up as fast as the PowerPoint did
Switch.
earlier,
Yeah.
sorry.
can you switch course?
Well, let me just,
So I was just wondering, this road right here, and then there's this little tiny piece of
Yeah.
land right here. What's the story behind that, do you know? I mean, is that a way to get access to it as well?
You want to buy it?
that was a stub road that was built with the subdivision. It does not abut the property that's being offered for sale. I think at one point there was, in planning, looking at connecting a road across. That's not going to happen in today's world, but I think that's what the thought was years ago when that was built.
Do you know who owns that little piece, though, that Councilmember Lee's mentioning? Just that
Right
teeny
there.
little...
That little strip?
She's asking a good question because we could get access potentially if that's something that's...
Are you waiting for his
public.
cable so you can give us a satellite view? Will you unplug it and hand
I've
it
got
to
it.
Jordan? Okay. Really want to,
See that?
It's like torture. Yes.
Now I'm racing you, Jordan and Andy.
You don't steal Andy's cable.
It's steep.
So Mayor, this haircut, where did you get it?
it's a little too personal for this meeting.
Is there any reason, Andy, why we would not sell it if there are interested parties? I mean, is there any advantage to the city keeping it?
I don't see any need for that
Below the
property
dam.
below the dam.
Yeah.
This is the road that you were talking about. This is that other stub road you saw. The reservoir's up here. You don't see much because of the trees in this view.
Your IT guy is literally sitting on his hands because I think he just wants to take the driver's seat. Just give it to me and let me do it.
Same map I've got.
So back to the question of the sale and how you should publish the sale. I guess what I was trying to get to is it reasonable, and I don't mean, there's a 0.001% chance that anyone would take out all those trees, bring in fill, and actually develop the property or have an interest in purchasing it. Then it becomes a practical matter of, highest and best use. If the city has no use for it, and the adjoining property owners, although I really like the idea of giving maybe they even work some agreement and they each buy a piece that's affronting their property. So that's a possibility. But what I would think makes sense based on what type of property it is, and the situation would be to go ahead and notify, as you suggested, Councilmember Page, the other property owners, see if there's any interest there, and then pursue selling it to those properties without going through a process. And to Councilmember Adams' point, I think generally speaking, you'd always want to follow whatever the policy is. However, this is under 5 acres, and it just doesn't seem practical that you would sell this to some outside party. So I think as long as you notify anyone who has adjoining property, that would be my thought.
If we can legally restrict that. Is this in the Happy Hollow area?
No, it's
This is west.
It's west.
West of 5th East.
Do any of us live up there? Does anyone know these folks personally on the council? Can I ask?
This is former Dick Bowman property. I guess it's still
Yes.
the family, right? I don't know. who's
I don't
living-
believe the family
living
lives
there
there
now.
anymore. I think the son lives on this home over here.
Yeah, I know this family, this gentleman originally coached my kids in soccer one year. We don't share religious boundaries, but I do know them and do know that they have expressed some question, but I have not had a discussion with them as to what their intent is, and that's slightly led to my comment before about this property being developed, and, you know, ideally, I would like to see if these folks have an agreement with these folks to acquire it from him, it would almost feel cleaner to just have the city sell whatever they're buying to them and whatever they're selling to them, instead of having this property owner buy it all and then have a side agreement. You know, it just maybe would seem a little more clean, but.
But is it the home on the south, to the right side of the dirt lot, that initially is really trying to buy it, right?
Or is it actually the dirt, isn't it the dirt lot?
There's a new home there?
He tore the home down and is building a new home on that dirt spot.
And whose residence is that?
Pardon me?
Who lives there?
The owner's named Owen Fisher. I believe he lives in this home currently.
It's actually the grandson of the original owner.
Yes. For the old timers, that's the old Verl Walker home. And Mr. Fisher is his grandson.
So back to my original question then, that little strip of land, is there, like if we sell this and we want access to the dam area, then are we able to get to it from here, or what's the story with that?
Again, that road's been stubbed in that fashion probably for 50 years. When the subdivision was first developed, maybe even before the subdivision, when it was just a dirt lane.
There's a sliver right there, though, is what Councilmember Lee's asking about, that separates our property and the road. Who owns the sliver, I think, is what she's asking.
I can't get the GIS to come up, so I don't know that.
Yeah, that's the question I have. How do they access that dam?
We've always accessed it from this side. This doesn't go to the dam. The dam's down here. It just goes to the pond.
Okay.
We'll keep an easement.
Yeah, I'm sure that.
Right.
I mean, it looks like the property line goes right here, almost on this little waterway, and there's pavement beyond it currently, and it looks like a road that accesses our
kind of a
piece currently. But what you have shown on the map has our property, our ownership ending at the waterway.
That's where
cutting off.
That's where it appears that the property line is, yes.
With 4 or 5 potential buyers, wouldn't it be better just to let it go, put it on the website? Just do a silent bid? Let's have Questar Gas auctions off their surplus property, just, it could be a silent bid, and no one could come back and say, hey, you sold it to, you just.
If we don't care who owns it, that's the best way to do it. If we're
Why do we
okay
care
with
who owns
whoever, just for some of those various reasons, that if we don't want anybody to develop on it, which I can't imagine anybody doing, but.
Well, I think we control that through the agreement, to sell the contract.
Yeah, it's probably not even zoned, what?
It's probably zoned R18 like all the surrounding property is.
So I'm getting the sentiment you have someone you'd like to sell it to. You have a preferred.
I do not.
We just have an offer.
You have someone that.
Someone's come to us and asked us if we'd sell it. That's the extent of where we are today.
And you're simply asking for direction on
what
how to
process
dispose
you would
of it.
like us to
Are
go
we
through.
even interested in
Are
disposing?
you interested in what process? Yes.
Yeah.
We're happy to throw it on the website. That's not a problem to us at all.
I think you certainly notify the contiguous property owners, the adjacent property owners all around. Throwing it on the website, I guess, I'm not sure why anybody would think they'd have any advantage to buy it, who's not an adjoining property owner, but anyway, I don't think there's any reason not to sell it, but I think we.
So the request tonight is, how do you want the staff to move forward? Someone like to take a stab at a motion at that, whether it's do nothing or?
I think Councilmember Page already did. He suggested, contacting the contiguous, moving forward, selling it, and contacting the contiguous property owners, and I also spoke that I agree with that.
So was that a second?
Was that a motion? I don't think you made a motion.
Oh, do we need to make a motion? I thought they were just asking for direction.
I didn't say motion.
I'll make that motion then, that we contact contiguous property owners and move forward with the sale.
Okay, and I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Garn and a second by Councilmember Page, as outlined. Any further discussion?
There'll be no other advertising of it. It'll be specifically, this is the buyer pool. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'll amend my motion to, to place it on the
Advertise it.
website.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm on board.
That's still your second?
Yeah, second that.
Make a motion second as outlined, amended motion and second as outlined. Any further discussion? Councilmember Lee, will you start a vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous. Next on our agenda is consideration of a resolution of the City Council. Try that again. Consideration of a resolution of the City Council of Kaysville City, Utah, authorizing the issuance and sale of not more than $1,375,000 aggregate principal amount of sales tax revenue bonds, Series 2017, and related matters for the purpose of financing the construction of Pioneer Park. I wonder who wrote that. That wasn't me, just for full disclosure.
And that's only part of it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. We've been talking about the development of Pioneer Park for several months. And tonight we've included in your packet a parameters resolution which establishes the intent to finance a portion of that park through the issuance of revenue bonds. So the parameters resolution expresses our intent to issue bonds and also sets the maximum parameters that the council is comfortable with, and then allows us to go to market or to negotiate with different banks or to put it out to bid. So as long as it fits within those parameters, it gives us the opportunity to go out and market those issues. We also have Bruce Williams here, who is from Zions Bank Public Finance, who is helping us with the marketing of these issues. This is really the first step. There will also be 2 publications in the newspaper expressing our intent to issue bonds, and there will be a public hearing scheduled for June 15th. We think prior to June 15th we will have negotiated a sale, and we will identify the terms of that sale to the council to approve and move forward on. So we'd ask that you adopt the parameters resolution, allow us to market this issue.
So that is the only action you're looking for tonight, is the adoption of the parameters resolution and then that agenda item.
Yeah, this is exactly what we had talked about in our budget meetings and previously with regard to Pioneer Park, and allows the staff to negotiate for the issuance of those bonds, the terms and all of that. You'll bring back to us formal action, and at that time then we either adopt or not adopt and move forward. But that allows us then to produce the financing for the initial phase anyway, of construction of Pioneer Park.
Yeah, we will bring it back before the council before we authorize the sale.
Absolutely.
At the risk of being really, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and that amount does include if we were to do the walkway all the way around, is that correct, or no?
No, the total project is $1,550,000, and that excluded the walkway. But after discussing it with Cole, he thinks there's some, once we get the contract in place, he thinks there'll be some savings there that we can provide that as well.
Okay.
I was just going to say, at the risk of being redundant, to point out that the support, so this is a revenue bond, right?
Correct. They're sales tax revenue bonds, so the sales tax becomes the security, but our intent is to fund the debt service with park and recreation impact fees. We can get a better interest rate by using sales tax as the security.
That makes sense. So it saves us more money, but our intention is to use the park impact fees, which will then support the repayment of the note. So, and the reason that's important is because when we have so many other needs like roads that we need to attend to, this doesn't detract from that. In other words, the source of funds to repay this bond would not come from a source that would, jeopardize any other city service or project.
Correct.
And the other thing that's important to realize, there was, I think when earlier there was a lot of interest in this area to go ahead and move forward with Pioneer Park and move up the schedule. And a couple of comments on that. It really doesn't take away from other parks either, because these impact fees can only be used for new construction, not, to improve an existing park. Is that correct?
Correct.
As well? And then finally, in today's environment, with construction costs going up faster than interest rates, it actually makes sense financially to do this now, not just from the interest of those in the community who will most use the park, although it's of course available to everyone. But you could certainly make an argument from a time value of money standpoint that it's actually less expensive to bond for it now than it would be to construct it 5 years from now.
Okay. Mayor has stepped out, so I'm assuming Mayor Pro Tem right now. Are there any further discussions, or I'll call for a motion?
So I'll make a motion to authorize the issuance and sale of not more than $1,375,000 aggregate principal amount of sales tax revenue bonds, Series 2017.
I'll second that.
That's a motion by Councilmember Garn and a second by Councilmember Lee for adopting or approving the resolution to move forward with the financing. Any further comments?
There's no public hearing necessary, right? So this is
there
a
is.
It will be on June 15th. That's part of the action.
So you're going to bring us the homework and then a public hearing on whether we do it or not.
Aye.
I wouldn't call for a vote, sorry.
I haven't called for a vote yet, but thank you. But yeah, that's right. So we will have a public hearing, plus we'll have your negotiated terms and everything for us to consider and for the public to realize and comment on at that time. Correct? Okay. All right, then I will go ahead and call for a vote. I
think it's your
it's
turn.
me. I think so I'll go ahead and vote aye.
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 Great. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have item number 7, acceptance of improvements for Hill Farms Phase 2C subdivision. Mr. Thompson?
Hill Farms Phase 2C is the phase that's located along Phillip Street, down Angel Street. That's been installed and inspected by the Public Works Department and recommended that we accept the improvements. There's nothing out of the ordinary on this, so we were just recommending standard acceptance of improvements with the 10% warranty and the 1-year time frame.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. You got it.
I went and walked through this today, and so our procedure, again, right, they call for their initial inspection, we go out, we run it through, and that initial inspection has to be completed 100%, right? And then they call for a second inspection to come and prove out all that work is done, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so once this warranty period that we're about to award starts, their subdivision is supposed to be basically to the T, correct?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, the inspection was done on March 17th, and I did a walkthrough here, and there's a lot of obliterated concrete. Now, my own concession on my debate here would be that at the 1 year, we could pick it up, and I essentially have arguments that that's kind of a better way to do it, but since it's not the current policy, I do have photos, we could get the slideshow out if you like, but there's blown out curb and gutter, sidewalk cracked, chunks of sidewalk. So, does it need to be up to a higher standard? I mean, the inspection was just done about a month ago, and you can tell from weathering and whatnot that these cracks and breaks and all that, the damage didn't just occur since March 17th. I mean, on the one hand, like I say, I'm comfortable that at the end, if there's a black and white letter of the law, when we go out, we say, okay, you gotta fix all this. But it doesn't seem like it's congruent with policy currently. So, maybe it's something we can think about. And there's another idea I had is perhaps, I don't know, a lot of the council is probably semi-familiar with these things, but a lot of times I think we look at these and we never get the punch list and we kind of just gloss it over and we go, okay. But it's a very expensive amount of infrastructure that we are improving day in and day out. And I don't think it would hurt if we took a field trip one time, all of us, for 30, 40 minutes on one of these phases and had Public Works just walk us through, you know, the inspector and the director, and say, okay, here's what we're looking for. This is okay, that's okay, so that any of us at any given point can go through and we don't go, wait a minute, why is this all blown up? I didn't approve that. And then we have an understanding like, okay, that's intolerance. So I think it would help to, you know, dovetailing in success framework, maybe that could be a bullet on the agenda for Public Works success framework to look at. Is how do we tighten that up? Because we've got several photos that even some of the repairs weren't excellent, so.
Okay.
There's one other. While I was down there, it's a little bit ancillary, but I happened to come across, I know that in Hill Farms, I know a lot of those properties, those big open space, old mansion, old world properties, were used to increase density in Hill Farms. And while I was walking the phase here, I came across, there's a bright orange laminated sign on the gate to one of the Hill properties that has the barn, the pool, the basketball court, you know, and I need your help understanding this. Is there restrictions? Because the sign's court only, and there's a lot of grassy open space. And if you want to be here past 5, you must call, and I'll just leave names out, but it was the husband and wife of the property who actually owned the property. Is that okay? Is there verbiage in the HOA documents that allow them to close that open space at 5 p.m.?
I think we could address that, but it's probably outside the scope, at least from the improvements exception that's on the agenda tonight, but certainly a discussion that we could
Where it
have.
falls into this phase, I hate to let this phase keep going further down the road.
Okay.
Actually, I didn't realize it fell in the same phase, so that's fair.
Is the open, or the basketball court you're referring to, is that on their personal lot?
Well, is that not considered as the open space?
No, there's large lots.
It's in the back of that lot.
Okay, if it's on their lot.
Right there on Peach Blossom, and it says, you know, only play on the basketball court and can't be here past 5.
Okay.
Or call so-and-so.
I'm not familiar with that exact circumstance. If it's within the private lot, it is not considered open space. If it's in one of the areas that are marked as, I don't even see one on this phase, an area that's specifically designated as common open space, then it has to be open and accessible
But
to
these
the
big
owners.
lots did indeed factor into the open space, correct? To increase
Only,
the density.
only in the density calculations. It's not
So they're
called,
not
this is
available.
not open space here, even though it's very much open. It is private lot. When we do the open space calculation, one of the factors is the average lot size. So that lot counts as one lot. And when you average it, it brings the average up, which brings the open space requirement down somewhat.
Sure.
But the private lots are not considered open space.
My personal opinion on that, it just seems a little bit subjective, but it gained a lot of density, and people can't freely roam in and out of it. When I lived in an HOA, I could go anywhere. There's no fences, so anyway.
Well, I don't think some of the issues that Councilmember Adams brought up, that you brought up, are not really directly related, at least, to the acceptance of improvements. But the one assertion that you made is that if you were...
The open space has to be improved.
If you were the one who was charged with, as a city employee, inspector, to approve these and say, yes, they're at a point where we can accept the improvements with the 10% surety warranty, you would not approve it. But I guess the question is that, you know, and I don't know that the person who inspected it for the city is here to speak to that, you know, or what the criteria is, or why this one met acceptance. So I don't know that, you know.
Slightly unclear. There's a lot of damage still to the sidewalk and curb and gutter.
So what happens, you know, in that situation? Clearly, Councilmember Adams, you've had a lot more experience in contracting, but I do know in the homes that I've watched be built over the years and in subdivision, that it often happens that there is cracked concrete, then the contractors come back in and replace that, you know, I guess at their expense. So I just, you know, I'm certainly not, I'm reluctant to second guess the city's, we do have the 10% surety, and to second guess the city's inspection if they are assessing that it, you know, is ready to be accepted as is, subject to the warranty, then I'm not sure that, I mean, I don't know that delay hurts either if there's an answer, you know, that needs to be, you know, we need more information, but I think you're in a unique position because you have expertise in that, and so you see things that are maybe not, you know, when you've inspected it, that are perhaps you feel are not up to par, but I'm just, you know, I'm not sure that would have enough information to vote no on the basis of that, but.
I don't think anyone motioned to decline it. I think it was merely some commentary to get some clarity and perhaps going forward. It's a policy that needs to be tightened up. I think you heard the city engineer just make a statement. That
I'll certainly have that discussion with Public Works and the inspector and make sure we're covering ourselves appropriately.
And quite frankly, you know, in mercy to developers, you know, if there's a modification to that policy where they bring it up to X level, you know, because a lot of times you'll replace concrete several times, you know, so maybe we modify that policy. But I'm pointing out that right now it's been reaffirmed. It's not completely uphill.
So I would make a motion then to table the item and to get more, is that the appropriate thing, to find out more information, I guess?
I would suggest that we just accept these improvements and direct staff to review their policy on what the standard is.
The items that are yet to be fixed will be covered with within the warranty period, as well as the 10% surety bond.
And I don't do these inspections. The Public Works does it. They inform me when it's passed. So.
Yeah, I apologize, because I thought I heard you say that maybe there was some question as to whether, and you would talk again with the inspector? Or just regarding the policy?
I will talk with them regarding the policy and what they're looking at, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because if it's not in complete accordance, there's no harm here. I would second the motion to table it, just so that we can take a peek and say, okay, what's going on here, and then come back to us. So we can actually get, you know, a clear-cut view of the procedure, and maybe even a written copy of the procedure, how this works.
What's the consequence of delaying it until the next meeting? Is there any consequence to doing that? I mean, acceptance of improvements, that doesn't delay. Does it delay further construction progress? It does.
What it does,
2 weeks on a warranty period.
No, that's not the issue. The issue is when we modified the ordinance about 2 or 3 years ago to allow homes to start construction prior to acceptance of improvements. One of the caveats in that was that they could not have an occupancy until the improvements were accepted. In this case, they have some homes that are essentially complete, and they would like to be able to occupy those homes. So that's the consequence. It's not a concern to me personally. That's what the developer's concern is.
So we're bending a little to try and accommodate that.
I don't know that we're bending at all.
I don't believe we're bending
under the
anything.
assumption that there's something wrong with the report that Public Works staff provided to the council.
Photos of broken concrete.
So let me do this. Let me amend my motion then to accept the improvements, but to review the process, I guess, and report back to the council at the next meeting.
I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Garn and a second by Councilmember Snell as outlined. Further discussion?
I just wanted to make a comment. I've noticed I'm in an area that currently has construction going on, and it seems that if I see a sidewalk or curb and gutter that are broken, they tend to fix that at the end when they pour the driveway. That's what I've noticed. I haven't seen anybody not do the fix.
And I think if you hear me clearly, you'll
so
hear me say,
I
I
see
think
the
that's
procedures
brilliant,
needing
but
to
the
be
policy is not being adhered to.
right.
When we have signatures from staff vetting that it is there right now. And I've got pictures with old damage. They didn't just happen since
Right.
March 17th. That's all.
But I do think that's an excellent point, that, you know, if a developer wants to keep their reputation, they're not gonna have people moving in with, you know, severely cracked curb and gutter and entryways, and I've seen the same thing, but you would think that they would want to keep their reputation to have.
To Dave's point, or Councilman Adams' point, if the policy is such that it has to be up to a certain point, and it's not, and it's being passed, maybe we need to look at that, which is part of the motion.
You know, there's a certain point where maybe some of the casualness could just be tightened up. You know, we experienced something of that nature a couple weeks ago here in this room, and that was pretty eventful. And, you know, so there's some things maybe we shouldn't have to deal with. I'm just saying maybe we tighten up. Success framework could apply here. However, it doesn't seem to, you know, and I think we're in agreement, Andy, it doesn't seem that if the pictures do show, it doesn't seem that's quite the order of things.
If we're missing something,
Training
we
opportunity.
certainly appreciate it being brought to our attention, and we'll address it.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second that I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Page, will you start, please?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous. Next on our agenda is proposed ordinance change of Kaysville City Employee Appeal Board. Mr. Scott.
Mayor, City Council, currently Title II of Chapter 7 of the Kaysville City Code establishes the City Council as the official appeal body for all employee discharges, suspensions, and similar type actions. At times in the past, there have been some concern raised by employees and probably others of the council's ability to be impartial of an action. At times it's hard, as certain actions are taken, for the council to completely stay in the dark, so to speak, to be able to keep things above board and not taint that appeal body in any way. Just caused me to look around a little bit and to see what other cities are doing. I wrote up a short staff memo with an example there of what Layton is doing. I did see a couple of examples that were very similar to that. I also saw several that simply appoint a hearing officer. Some did that on a 2-year revolving basis, and others did it off of a pick list of 10 qualified applicants that could serve in that capacity, and something that sometimes the employee could also agree to that person. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. If you're fine with how we're doing it now, that's okay as well, but just wanted to let you take a look at that and maybe discuss it a little bit.
I think that seems like a fair approach to take. That's always, I don't know, in fact, I think in my time on the council in aggregate, I don't think I've ever had an appeal brought before me as the council, as the appeals body. So I don't know that that's, you know, what it has been like or what it would be like to do that. I think it's probably important, though, to try to maximize objectivity and fairness in the appeals process, and so I think that there's, you know, I personally think it's probably a good change to make to the ordinance.
I do have a comment because I have been involved. One did not take place, and to specify the details, the timing would be inappropriate, but one was anticipated to take place and then ended up not taking place. But the awkwardness of our current process, and I don't even know, I don't have strong feelings of whether or not what's being recommended is the right way, but the awkwardness there was with the city council as the appeal body. The city council, in the spirit of fairness and due process, really couldn't ask any questions beforehand, and for that reason alone, it's just a little awkward, because if you say, you know, if the way it's outlined right now is that it would be the mayor and 2 council members and 3 members of the city staff, each from a different department, appointed by the city manager, and 2 members of the Kaysville City Council appointed by the mayor. Whoever the mayor is when that is done, if I'm reading this right, and 2 members of the city council appointed by the mayor. It doesn't necessarily say that the mayor would be part of that process. You can have some inquiry. You can have some conversation between the administration and the elected body where really if you have someone claiming an appeal as it stands right now, city council has to stay out of it because they may hear it, and there are certain circumstances where that seems a little strange.
Mayor, I also wondered if, and I guess this didn't take place before, but if you're convening 3 members of the body, there should be an open meeting, and I don't know if that lends further criticism, or I don't know how you plan on doing that before, if that even came up, but it could also be problematic.
It is. That was discussed, and I believe that at least it was anticipated that those appeal hearings are open-door meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just make, in addition to what's being said, just one more comment. That, I don't know if this is the perfect solution, but clearly it's an improvement. There's problems if that were to come up with the way it is today. This is clearly an improvement in my mind, in my assessment. And so rather than wait for the, perfect system, you've also done some benchmarking, looking at what other cities do. Why not move forward with the improvement rather than the paralysis of analysis, looking for the perfect way to do it.
Well, 2 council and a mayor does not constitute a quorum.
No, that's right.
So, but I have concerns with that because I mentioned before a while back, I don't remember what city it was, South Salt Lake somewhere, they sent letters out looking for ethics board committee people. I still think the sampling should come outside of the city walls. I think there's bias that could still come in. If this is an effort to remove bias and give fair chances and that sort of thing, and Mayor, hinted around that was kind of some sentiment that was expressed recently by actual, not an individual, but a legal counsel of such. So I think, you could pick employees. I just think there's too much room for bias.
Could I address one thing about that? I don't necessarily disagree. Sometimes you have a problem going out completely independent, finding the people or cost or who is really truly independent, and if they are truly independent, are they knowledgeable with the situation? Having said that, I think in this situation that could actually work, but it seems to me that there might even be a budget impact to that it's a little bit lengthier process. And just because you make one step doesn't mean you can't make another step later. So that's something that could be considered, but it's not really on the table at this point. So I think without disagreeing at all with what you just said, Councilmember Adams, why not move forward with an improvement now, and then maybe later that can be considered when, any budget impacts or anything else to going to a, more comprehensive outside ethics commission or whatever you would call it. But
it's a very rarely used measure to my knowledge, so I don't think it's detrimental. I think they offered like $100 per time you were needed to the individual.
I agree with what Councilmember Garner is saying in that I do feel like our current process is flawed, in my opinion, with the makeup, because it paralyzes the ability to inquire. Really, anyone on the council, including the mayor, to inquire of anything. That being said, I also like the idea of a completely independent person with an organization with 93 employees. It's a pretty small group, and it would be hard to. And this it's not a judicial hearing, but it would be hard to get a completely untainted jury, I would think, in that kind of in that kind of setting. And I actually like the idea of we talked about that. To your point, Councilmember, Shane and Mr. Scott and I talked about that prior to putting this on here. It'd be nice if there was a reasonably consistent norm. If it was the justice of peace for Kaysville, and that's why you don't know if those people who you ask or appoint, and the city that sent out those letters, I actually liked that idea. The thing I thought is, man, someone's got to keep track of who's up for office and rotate those people out, and if somebody doesn't get elected, then rotate those people out, and it becomes a lot of a lot of maintenance work for something that may never be used, or maybe used. Councilmember Snell was on for 8 years, 10 years collectively now, I guess, and never saw it. So that was the medium that we were trying to come up with. Is, I mean, I agree. I still would rather even see something else. But with Councilman Garn's point, I like the idea of moving outside of it just being the mayor and the council. So that if we have something.
Just to address one specific point that you made too, Mayor, where you said that, you know, it's difficult to maintain. However, I think it says here, the appeal board is not established with specific members, but is chosen each time an appeal is made in order to include individuals that are fair, impartial, and may not have a close relationship with the appealing party. So I don't know that there would be, you know, unless there is an appeal, there wouldn't really be maintenance in that regard, would there? Because you would only have to choose it if there was an appeal.
The way it's written now, no, you're right. You wouldn't have to worry about it. If we were to invite specific individuals to,
right,
even from outside of the city,
mm-hmm,
then depending on who they are, if it was I'm president of the Chamber of Commerce, and it would, you know, or something like that, then that's at least a consistent. I'm not even sure the chamber's the right organization, but I'm saying if you had something like that, then great. If you use other elected officials, then you've got some movement. If it was a city manager in an adjoining city, or 2 city managers in an adjoining city, or a city attorney from it, you know, something like that would at least be more consistent.
And what would be ideal is if there was actually, you know, a resource there that cities shared. So in other words, they're already there, and all you have to do is tap into them with agreement, and you don't have to, as a city, form this, you know, recruit this independent, for like you said, the infrequent event where you do have an appeal, and the city has to go to all the work to maintain an outside independent body. Are there, and maybe I'm not knowledgeable on that, but is there already independent bodies formed that you can just tap into and use?
Well, there are 2 cities that I saw, Bountiful and Clearfield, that both use a hearing officer. And so Bountiful, for example, maintains a list of qualified individuals from which they can select that on a case-by-case basis, and both the city and the appellant would agree on that person. So I would assume we would be able to use a similar list or develop one on our own of qualified individuals. And it's just one person. It's a hearing officer.
That was my concern about
cases.
that. You got a single individual being called upon to make that judgment call in an appeal. I like the idea of having some deliberation, and I think it introduces more fairness by having more individuals involved in it. So I'm not sure I'm a fan of that. But I do agree that this is an improvement, and I think a marked improvement over what our current ordinance is. And I think it would lend itself, again, it's such a rare experience that I would like, in fact, I'll go ahead right now and just make a motion to adopt the ordinance with the proposed changes, so that we make this improvement, and if such time an appeal happens and this is found to be lacking in some regard, then, you know, that a future council take that up and see what happens with that. But I'd like to make that motion now.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
A motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Garn for approval as outlined. Further discussion? I have some.
Just amend it.
Just a question here. So you were saying that if we had 3 council members, that would be a conflict with the open meetings laws?
It would.
That's a quorum.
That's a quorum, and would have to be noticed and open and.
Well, I guess you could notice it and do a
closed session. Yeah, that would be the only other caveat.
Well, I really, I could see that there could be some big prejudices pulling from the city workers. I mean, that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm just from the school that I believe that the elected representatives they're supporting the people of the city. I don't think that can be. My opinion, if everyone feels that we need to go into something like this, I can see some advantages, but I think it should be swapped where we have 3 city council members and maybe 2 city people and just give that notice out there that we're going to do that and just do it that way. I would like to have the decision, or I guess if there's going to be a prejudice, I'd rather have it on the side of the council versus on the side of the city. I mean, that's my opinion. That's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, and that, first to acknowledge your assessment there, but just a question on picking the members. It does say, does it make any difference in your thinking, the part where it says you're picking someone from, they have to be from a different department or division? Because I have to say, you know, when we say we're small at 91, I get that, and this is probably my own ineptness at, I remember faces pretty well, but I have to say we have probably about the same number in the insurance department, and I know everybody in my division, and I know a lot of the directors. I don't know everybody of the 85 employees. You know, in the other divisions, I would be completely blind to whatever's going on. I'm too busy worrying about my own division to know what so-and-so employee is doing over in, you know, if I'm in the police department, would I know what someone is doing in public works, for example, and vice versa? I might know of them, but I'm not sure I would know the situation. So I think you actually, I would argue you actually do get a fair amount of independence by that provision that says that, you know, it's from a different division.
Is it fair to be evaluated by your equivalent peer? Is that?
We'll see. I guess that's the question. I do know that, you know, when there's problems, it seems like everybody in the city knows about them. I mean, that's just what my experience has been, and it's not just within the department, it's without the department, especially if it's a serious matter.
I think, Larry, I'd amend the motion. I don't know how you feel about this, but I'd amend it to where it's either 2 council and the mayor, or 3 council. And I'm not quite finalized with the amendment here, just some discussion. And then the other 3 have to be outside people, or they're 2 if we do a 5-member quorum on it. That they've got to be pulled from. Then we're not pulling 5, and that's not burdensome. Yeah. But they've got to be pulled from somewhere else, like jury duty. And even just, so you get a really diverse group.
Maybe it's just by invitation. Maybe it's just city. It could even be as generic as the city manager shall appoint. And that's another question I have. But shall appoint 2 or whatever it is from adjacent city staffs or adjacent city department heads or something. So at least they'd be they would be aware of city process, but they wouldn't be internal. But now there's 2 thoughts I have come into my mind that I just want to at least share. It said we're striking the mayor shall be the non-voting member of the appeal board except on the matter for which there's a tie vote. I'm fine to have that, to strike that, but I actually, there's that part of me that says I don't think you should, and I actually should think you should designate who the chair of the appeal board is, because when someone files an appeal and it goes to the city recorder by state statute, and the city recorder then has to direct it to the appeals board, who is that? And who is that person? And I don't believe staff should be vetting that first. I think it should go to the appeal board. And so I'm not sure, so maybe to your point, maybe if you wanted to make it completely independent, you could have it be 2 members of the council, the mayor, the mayor who is the chair, and 2 members of the council the mayor selects, and 3 members, whether it's department heads or city employees from one of the neighboring cities. You could even be as generic as
Davis
that.
County.
But then I'm going to take that just a little bit further and say, but my only hesitation is in having the city manager be the one to appoint that, is it's likely the city manager was involved in the termination. So would it be appropriate and fair to have the city manager be the one to appoint who's on the appeal board that's going to make the decision on, who's going to rule on the decision that they were a part of?
No.
But it's just a
The only potential
question.
arbitrarial thing in there I would see is that if the mayor picks the 2 council members, I would add to that becomes a lottery for the 2 council members. The mayor's the fixed figure as the chair, and there's a lottery for the 2 council members that get drawn out.
Well, and not only that, but the mayor would be in charge of contacting adjacent cities and be responsible for picking up the additional 2 or 3.
I wonder if we should table this and solidify it up a little bit more.
Sounds like we might need to.
I'll motion to amend Chris's motion and table this item.
You just do a substitute motion.
Substitute motion to Chris's motion that we table this item until it's tailored up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Is there a second to the substitute motion?
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Thank you. A motion to table and by Councilmember Adams and a second by Councilmember Garn. Further discussion? Councilmember Lee?
I'm not so sure if we really need to table it, if we have a good feel for what we're talking about as being the right direction to move into.
I'll entertain a clear-cut direction. Throw one out.
Yeah. Well, I think the direction would be, or an alternate motion.
Substitute to the substitute?
Substitute motion.
Substitute to substitute.
Second powered.
Yeah.
And maybe
Well-
before you do, again, this goes back to my initial comment. Let's not adopt ordinance amendments that aren't clearly written.
Well, that's true,
Let's
too.
write it so we all know
Yeah.
what we're voting on, not approve it subject to language that we all think that's not what I think we said. Well,
I mean, I think
Yeah.
we're going to be fine.
Do we have some
Yeah.
direction then to give staff to write that? Could we do that?
Yeah, yeah.
Just throw out the bullets and say rewrite it.
So the direction to staff would be to rewrite the ordinance for the appeal board and have it involve or have it be members of the mayor, 2 city council members, and 2 or 3 adjacent.
You'd want 3.
Three adjacent city department.
Right. Does it have to be adjacent, so Fruit Heights, Layton, or Farmington,
just-
or could you say Davis County?
I think you could even let them come back with some suggested language, but yeah. I mean,
Okay.
Can you throw the lottery comment on the council selection in there?
But also to include that the mayor would be the one picking the additional members
Of council?
of the board, of
So
who
he
would
would
be on
pick
this.
the council members, no
He-
lottery.
He or she.
He or she, yeah. Sorry, Susan, but
Yeah, I don't know if it needs to be a lottery. I think the mayor would rotate it, maybe.
That would just be the only
I don't
question
know if
is,
that's-
easier on him, on the chair, or he or she, whoever is the mayor. I think, it's less burdensome on, I don't know, how you feel, Mayor, you're in the chair, but
I don't anticipate
staff, like a random
well-
drug test, it's boom, boom, there's the 2.
I may be here for another 10 years, so you never know.
There may be times that it's inappropriate for a certain
That's-
council member
that's what I was
as a
gonna say.
relationship or neighbor or something
Right.
else. It might be better to
That
have
can
somebody
be
else too.
explored out.
It's hard to put all that in an ordinance, though. If you just leave it up to the mayor to choose, he can just weigh all those things.
If it were before me right now, I'll tell you that if I was a non-voting member and had to choose 2 council members, I would just no different than any other appointment. I would ask everyone, do you have a strong preference? And usually, most of the time, that comes down to, I don't really want to do that, and I don't mind, and I'll do it if you have to, and then make a decision. But I can see, I suppose, there could be a time in the future where, does that get perceived as bias? But I get accused of bias all the time, so it's probably not any different for me, but somebody else might feel different in the future. So I don't think it's a real issue, but especially if you tried to outline the process. I mean, I bring a process on planning commission member appointments to the council and say, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And most times council says, yeah, that works. And one time at least, they've said, yeah, why don't we do this a little bit different? So why don't you maybe as part of that direction, have staff bring back an amended version, maybe with 1 or 2 options.
Yeah.
Don't overword it so that we're here all night. But
Underword it? We'll underword it.
Underword.
Underword it, but address both what Councilmember Adams is suggesting, and I think that, and then give a couple options. I'm not even sure whose motion we're on, because we've had like 4 now. I think Councilmember Lee's substitute
The
motion.
Well, it was to table it and then just give staff direction.
Okay. So that was your motion?
And it was
seconded.
Dave that made the motion and Jake seconded.
Okay, you started making a substitute,
Yeah,
but
I
you're not
was just
making one.
commenting,
Okay.
yeah.
So we're back to Councilmember Adams' motion to table. We'll just leave it at that, and I think the direction is clear without it being
was.
included in the motion. And who was the second? Councilmember Garn.
Garn.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Garn, will you start a vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Next on our agenda is modification of purchasing procedures relating to change orders.
We adopted a purchasing and procurement document last year, I think in November, and there's been some concern raised about the provision for change orders. Right now, it allows the staff to authorize those up to 15% of the total project costs, recognizing that if it's a $10 million project and 15% of that can be $1.5 million, is that appropriate for staff to be doing without the council doing themselves, or at least being aware of? So if we can, as I mentioned in the staff report, we can keep that 15%, we can change the percentage, or we can put just a dollar amount in there. I mentioned the $25,000 threshold, which kicks us to the formal bid process. If that you want to maintain that as kind of a number to go with, we can do that as well. So that's how I've altered the purchasing document, but of course, everything's on the table, whatever direction you'd like to give.
And if you are going to have the council, just maybe one word, your amendment says change order is no more than $25,000. The city council shall be notified of any change order in excess of the dollar amount. If the intent is to have the council approve it, then it probably needs to be approved. Yep. City council shall approve any change and have it come back here. Notified is probably up to, I emailed the council and told them, hey, we're
Sure.
spending an extra $500,000.
That works either way.
If you're going to head this direction, approved seems a little, that's one word that we could probably apply in.
But you know, I still think 15% threshold should be in there, 15% or $25,000 max.
My only add would be, since 25 is such a pinnacle threshold in town, and in studying other cities, some cities that are exponentially larger obviously have larger, but some that are similar to us are less than 25 on their formal, informal anyway. So cutting to the chase, I would throw out there that it's a $12,500, 50% of the council threshold can be let out in gross in change orders before the council needs to be aware that a project is running over.
But our original is how much?
15%.
15%
of gross.
No, I'm saying, but our current, on our current policy, it comes to the council at what dollar amount? Remind me.
For change orders?
No, I'm just saying in
For any
general, for any
purchase.
purchase.
Oh, well, 25,000 would be the formal bid.
Yeah, I actually like the 25,000 because it was consistent with an original, what would originally have to come before the council. So it's a fast dollar amount that is consistent with the other amount. And 15%, it kind of seems like, well, what if you have a $10,000 project and it goes up $1,500? You're going to come back to the city council for that. So I kind of like the 25,000 better. And not that there's a perfect right or wrong here, but in my mind, there's a balancing between control, right, and approvals where it's significant and the council being aware of things. And on the other side, there's a cost to that. It's often been said, you could build a car that no one would ever get killed in, right? But it would get half a mile to the gallon, and it would, take up 4 lanes or something, whatever. It's just to make the point, you gotta ask the question, how much is enough? Where's the trade-off between inefficiency in the city? And there's a cost to inefficiency, by the way, that may be more significant than the control you get by getting too granular. So the question is, where's the right amount? And so for me, my vote would be to adopt this change with the 25,000
Your vote or
threshold.
your motion, I just want to make sure, as long as you're going to say it.
Okay, so actually,
can say
I'll
it
turn
twice.
this into a motion, yes, to adopt the 25,000 new threshold.
And with,
Approved?
I would second that with the addition that the last sentence in
Yes.
paragraph G indicate that the city council shall approve of any change orders in excess of this dollar amount, not just be notified.
Thank you, yes, I accept that
Then
amendment.
I'll second.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Garn and a second by Councilmember Snell for amendment as outlined. Any further discussion? So we're essentially adopting it as written with the exception of striking the words "be notified" and replacing it with "approved."
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's as recommended.
I would only add to that a $25,001 project has the capability of having a $25,000 change order.
Mhm.
So, you know, there could
That was
be,
my thought.
there could be a formula applied. I know I've been championing this. I didn't quite realize that it was coming up. And I appreciate the fact that it is on the agenda. I'd like to express that appreciation. So that's the one concern I would have. Being a metrics guy, I think you would, you know, probably appreciate that. You can actually double the project size. And so I would only make a substitute motion that, well, maybe there's a formula that needs to be figured out, but.
Can I offer one, if you were gonna do
You're
that?
the metrics guy, you bet, go for it.
So what you would do to avoid like the $10,000 project with a 15% is say, well, now I'm lost, I thought I had it, but, so it's the combination of above 25,000. How would you do that? That's a
Yeah,
good
'cause
question.
75 is your formal.
It's $166,000. If you were to take a $25,000, if you're trying to employ the 15%, anything above $166,000 would be more than 15%.
Be more than 15%.
And I hate doing math in public, so if I'm wrong, heaven
You
forbid.
did good,
But-
but if you got the formal, informal, so a $10,000 job doesn't come before this body, just, you know, as a
Yeah,
fresher, but the
I can
25K,
see where you can-
25 and
yeah.
$1 does, and then,
Right.
so that's kind of, I guess where I'm coming from is that's our realm of control, right? Am I
Yeah.
correct, council? That's kind of our threshold of, hey.
I agree with-
We don't.
I agree with
so
what
I'm
you're
just
saying in principle, and you could come up with a formula. I don't want to try and do it here, you know, but I would say that, first of all, that could happen, okay? So you could have a $25,000 job, and that's what we're concerned about. We're not so concerned, I don't know that the 15% really helps you at 166,000 because you've already got the $25,000 threshold. But the exposure to the city is 25,000, no matter what the original contract amount is. If we saw some pattern, and this is the practical argument, that there was a lot of $25,000 jobs or thereabouts that were getting approved, that change orders were getting approved, that was a 100% increase in the amount, I think we could relook at that. But
I think I could climb
yeah.
on board with that if we could add that, okay, over 25K we approve on a change order, but anything under 25K, we get an email. We don't have to approve it,
Perfect.
but we get alert.
Notification of all change orders.
Notified.
Well, that's actually a good idea, notification, because.
I would do that anyway,
I
whether
was
you put it
feel-
in here or not, but
I
let's-
have too many
let's do
emails
it.
already, right? But I always say, err on the side of sending me the email, you know, even if you don't think it's important, and then I have it, so.
So that needs
you know, I
to
mean,
be
you could-
included in this.
Yeah, and it's something you can put in a policy, it's not an ordinance, so maybe just, if it's under that, you know, I mean,
like your
because
idea of
the.
the trend, you know, I doubt it will. So I think
So you
that's
could follow the
responsible.
trend if you got an email,
The
that's.
city council,
Yeah.
So maybe then, potentially, we modify our, we make another substitute motion to approve the change to the ordinance and the purchasing plan, with that change that the city council shall be notified of any change orders in excess of $25,000 and shall be notified of all change orders. Would that
Absolutely.
accommodate
Second that.
That's easy. Let's do that.
Okay.
All right, so we're approving something, again, without exact language. So let's
They
can figure it out
let's either
now.
spell it out, let's either
Yes.
read the whole sentence exactly how it's going to word, or let's
Fine. I'll
table
read
it.
the entirety of paragraph G. That would be my substitute motion.
Okay.
Any change orders, scope of work changes, extension of work, or other additions or corrections to existing contracting services, supplies, equipment, or materials, whether constituting a reduction or increase in bid amount to a current award, provided the change order is no more than $25,000, period. The city council shall approve of any change orders in excess of this dollar amount, comma, and the city council shall be notified of all change orders regardless of amount.
I'll second that because it dovetails my last concern,
that's a good
which
one.
was the change, we didn't define if that's change orders in gross. But if we are notified of them, Chris, then that's fine.
Okay,
Anyway,
so I'm balking a little bit on this amendment to my motion, and the only reason is, okay, I'm thinking, okay.
Well, your
not-
substitute's been substituted.
Oh,
I guess we need to recognize.
substituting, okay.
Or if you're going to substitute the substitute,
So let me ask the, sorry.
It's a clean motion.
Let me ask the motion maker, on the substitute motion.
I would love for all of you to withdraw your motions and have somebody else try and do it. I can't tell you that you have to do that, but that would make things a lot clearer, but.
Okay, yeah, so,
Can I get a motion to kill
it's
everybody's
crystal
motion and
clear
start
to
over?
Look at Andy, he's.
I guess my concern is,
He got his head in
let me ask a question about your motion. How many change orders are there, notwithstanding my comment that I don't mind receiving emails, how many emails is that going to generate if it's every change order? As opposed to maybe some, now we're getting too complicated, shouldn't be a lot, okay, not too many? Okay, then
It's not bad.
I withdraw my question then, or my question is answered, yeah.
So-
Yeah.
I think I have a substitute motion, and I think Mr. Adams seconded it.
I think it's a done deal, yeah.
All right.
Are you clear on the motion?
Absolutely,
And the
Crystal.
change? Okay.
Crystal.
Yes, sir.
Crystal.
I am. I wrote
What he's
down,
saying
I wrote,
is, it's on YouTube. We'll watch it.
I wrote down, I wrote down
Exactly
watch.
right. I have watched some of these back, and I'm still not sure I'm always clear on what we did, even if
No,
I
I
watched
think,
it back.
I think Councilmember Snell did a great job of articulating that.
All right, so we have a great substitute motion and a second. Councilmember Adams, you start a vote.
Aye.
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 Thank you, voting is unanimous. Next on our agenda is consideration of windstorm response resolution.
After the windstorm of, I think just last year, I think it was in May, there was some discussion, quite a bit of discussion last year of how the city responded to that windstorm. And there was I think, some feeling here among the council as well as the public that it would be nice to put something together where we have a plan and something we can follow when we have certain kinds of windstorms. So this is a first attempt at a resolution that would dictate more or less how we would respond, what the responsibilities of the city are, what the responsibilities of the public are. We're not bound to follow this exactly, but I think it's a good start, at least, a pretty good solution in dictating how we would respond to most events.
All right, discussion,
I
council?
like how the resolution, honestly, I like how the resolution provides flexibility, because there are, sometimes we get a weather alert or whatever, and you're gonna have a massive windstorm, and it winds up not being that much of a windstorm, not causing that much damage. Other times, we have a really big windstorm, like last year was a sizable one, but even more so back in 2011. So being able to tailor the response to the size of the event, I think is a good thing, and having some flexibility to do that. I also like having I like the clear expectation and the clear goal in the resolution that we will reach out and involve other non-public parties in potential responses to it. So I think that's a reasonable way to go.
I think a significant effort here on the part of staff was to have the public involved in as much of this process as they possibly can be, and have the city more or less responsible for city functions, utilities, et cetera. That's, I think, would be the goal, at least of this resolution.
Well, and I think having a consistent plan for even the coordination of
Yes.
activities,
Yeah,
I think is good,
yeah.
even
How
though
we
the
get together.
city may not be funding it, or the city may not be in charge of it, but at least coordinating and communicating the different responsibilities. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I like the assessment meeting that's called, and that gives that more
Can I
weight.
just add one? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I just had one thing though. Under Roman numeral 2, bullet 1, where it talks about in the event of an event as defined in this resolution affecting all or any part of the residents of the city, there shall be timely called an assessment meeting to include mayor, city council members invited by the mayor. Could that line just be that all council is invited? Because there is in the Utah OMA Open Meetings Act, there is clear-cut stipulations on how you file for an emergency meeting. And we could have a meeting tomorrow if we had to. There is a process for that. So I get that, you know, you might go, well, if we only have two, we don't have to have a quorum, we don't have to call them in. But I think we should be more inclusive on that. And it should be all council members are invited to come and participate in how we manage that. We all represent the taxpayers, and we all kind of, for the moment, we're somewhat spread geographically out. You know, I come from a corner where the winds aren't very bad. Larry's in an epicenter, you know, and so, you know, who knows, like, where are we getting the mix from? I just think it's more important for the people to say, you know, I want my rep who lives closest to me there too. So I just.
Well, that would be an easy amendment. All you have to do is drop invited by the mayor, and then you have city council members.
Yeah, simply just all council, so that we all.
We did think about this and did talk about worrying about the quorum. And if it's a very serious event, that would, it's an emergency event, it probably wouldn't be warranted. Are we ever going to have an Are we ever going to have an assessment or want to have an assessment where it's not necessarily an emergency situation? That's the only caveat, is if the mayor is allowed to call the city council members, I think it would be on him to say, yeah, we need all five here. We need them here. Or this is such a small thing. Let's not get under the auspice of the Open Meetings Act.
You're going to draw out a relevant example. I didn't want to draw it out.
What?
Last year in Cinco de Mayo's windstorm, I was the Public Works liaison. And when we all took office, we were given a little bit of a code of honor of how we respect one another's liaison positions that we don't toast at. And I'm going to leave names out because I'm just tired of that. But I was not phoned. Another council member was phoned to go right around with the department head of Public Works. And, you know, yeah, even a simple phone call of, hey, Dave, here's a scenario, and I think maybe this is a different option. How do you feel about that? Now, that's a great way to not toast it. So I didn't want to bring that out, but I do feel like there shouldn't be any ability to arbitrarily pick who's going to come and choose to spend tax dollars. We should all be here, even if it's small or large. I think it's a very simple ask.
Well, to the point, I mean, I'm not sure, I'm sort of ambivalent whether it's all council members, and I do think we should maybe check the provision or have the city, again, that's a legal question, but make sure that we're correct that in an emergency situation, you don't have an Open Meetings Act violation consideration. But on the other hand, to the other point that you made, Councilmember Adams, I think that the mayor, it's actually the mayor's role to assign liaison positions, and so it's not really inappropriate, although maybe not preferred, or you have a preference one way or another, but it's certainly not inappropriate for the mayor to decide, you know, who he would contact or needs to contact in an emergency situation. If it's a big emergency, you know, chances are every council member is going to know about it anyway in a windstorm situation, and would be proactive and be involved to the extent that they could. But you know, so I'm not sure the second concern is really that much of a concern. But
here's the OMA, if I may.
Yeah.
Emergency meetings, section 52.4.202. A public body may not hold an emergency meeting. Hold on, don't jump to conclusion. We're not done yet. Unless it makes an attempt to notify all members and a majority of the members approve the meeting. A public body need not give a 24-hour notice if unforeseen circumstances require an emergency meeting and it gives the best practical notice. So we can meet in 20 minutes if needed. And all I'm saying is I think we all deserve an email. Hey, guys, we're getting together at City Hall. Whoever's available, come now. We got staff throwing it on the website that we're doing it. I think it's in the spirit of fairness.
I don't have a problem with that change.
It's no problem at all.
It's fine.
The only downside to that is if someone comes to you and says, you didn't need to meet. It wasn't an emergency.
Well, that would
And
be
that's-
the majority of the council agree.
Right.
Right,
So
the majority of the
the
council would have to
mayor
agree
says,
with the
you know,
meeting.
I think we need to assess the damage,
Yeah.
and either 3 council members are unreachable, or one's unreachable and 2 say, I don't think we need to meet, this is not necessary. Then does that mean the mayor, the city manager, the chief of police, nobody gets together because 2 council members don't think it's necessary and one's not available? I mean, I have no problem with it. I think you could drop invited by the mayor, and then let the burden of the Open and Public Meetings Act take place at the time. And I have to tell you, I mean, the only other time, I don't know what Councilmember Adams is referring to last year, but I'll tell you, in December of 2011, I was getting ready to go to church, and my ecclesiastical leader called and said, we got authority to cancel church. And things were moving so quickly, and people gathered at the Public Works Center. And it was a Sunday morning to boot, and to stop and say, all right, hold on here. None of us should be together right now because I haven't notified the council that we're meeting, and they need to be here, and I haven't gotten a hold of everybody to see if they're okay with us meeting. And so everybody needs to disperse, and so that becomes I think you could just say, I think you could add this, simply take off invited by the mayor, and then hope whoever the mayor is at the time is thinking twice about how quickly things are moving. But I think if you took off invited by the mayor, then that satisfies city council members.
Yeah, then everyone gets an email.
Then everybody is.
I don't think anyone's gonna.
And everybody should be notified if whoever's, whoever's coordinating that, if it's Maria that's the recorder at the time, and then she can be the one to, and maybe you add city recorder, because then she can be the one to say, you all shouldn't be meeting here, I need to hurry up and notify this, and.
Yeah, again, likelihood and practicality, what is the risk that in an emergency situation where the whole council is meeting for that specific purpose and doesn't give 24-hour notice, that, anything can happen, anything's possible. I'm just speaking probabilities here that somebody's really going to take exception to that the council met to try and address an emergency situation and they didn't give us 24 hours notice. I mean, that seems
Very
like a little
unlikely.
bit far-fetched.
Specifically says you do
Not need to, yeah. Well, the question is judgment, so someone could question, okay, that wasn't enough of an emergency. I mean, that's a pretty thin line.
If you come to me with my home burning down and you need someone to help, I'm gonna be mad if you guys met as a 5-member court.
Just don't make any motions while you're there.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about property damage caused by wind, storm, flooding, or other similar events. I think by striking that line, I mean, I got to tell you, if we don't have some massive dam above us that could break and flood the community, but if we had some massive event, I think make everyone aware. But then that's also subject to include city council members. Well, how are they notified? And if you email everybody and nobody checks their email and says, I didn't get my email, I didn't see my email, it was Sunday morning, I don't look at my phone on Sunday. So I think if you take invited by the mayor out and just say city council members, then put the burden, I mean, they'll likely be criticized anyway, so put the burden on the mayor at the time to figure out how to notify people, and they should know that it's city council members, but.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we approve the windstorm procedure as outlined, with the one change, we take out to be invited by the mayor, so that all council is involved.
I'll second.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Adams and a second by Councilmember Garn for approval as outlined. Any further discussion? Councilmember Lee, will you start a vote?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is consideration of schedule change of the June 1st, 2017 City Council meeting. So Council, in our last meeting, we talked about a couple of things, the public hearing for our budget, and we moved that. As soon as we were done with the meeting, I can't recall which one of the council members said, wait, so we moved the public hearing to the 6th. Did we also move our meeting until the 6th? Because as it stands, our event for pickleball is at 6:30. So at a minimum, we need to delay the start time of the Thursday, June 1st City Council meeting probably till 8 p.m. Or, as I kind of thought was insinuated, but it turns out we just didn't make the specific, we did set the public hearing for June 6th. Do you want to move the city council meeting also to June 6th and have it start as soon thereafter as the public hearing is concluded?
I think that makes the most sense.
It does, and I will be missing the Power Commission meeting. It was moved over to the police station and will not be here, so we'll be at the same time running both meetings. But I think that would be fine. Miss that?
So in order to move a regularly scheduled meeting, we would need a motion from the council to move the June 1st City Council meeting to June 6th and have it begin as soon thereafter as the public hearing regarding the budget is concluded.
I'll make that motion of what you just said.
I'll second it.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Snell for approval as outlined.
It's a Tuesday.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Snell, we start a vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous. Next on our agenda is councilmember reports. Any councilmember reports to provide?
Hey,
This is also graduation, right?
Jordan? Yeah. Hey, if you don't mind, can you pull up Google Earth real quick? The substation down on south end of Deseret Drive. Just where the, the concrete and asphalt crush piles are. While they're doing that, it's just a suggestion. Since Angel Street has been put on hold, there's 14,000 cubic tons of material the Angel Street ditch needs to fill in the void. And I don't know the numbers. I've had a report on it a year ago. I wasn't able to find it. Rough estimates of those piles down there of structural fill. But I just wonder where the job kind of got, you know, off the train track a little bit. Maybe we have a little bit of leverage to tell the contractor, hey, we've got all this, you know, material over here, and it was 14,000 ton. I think it's 1763 a ton. Mayor, do you mind hitting that for me?
What was that?
14,000 times 17.
I'll lay borrow my calculator.
You don't trust me.
I don't want to do your math in public, let alone my own, so.
14,000 times, like, I think it was 1763 a ton. So that's a huge portion of the job. That's $246,000. And those piles are really an eyesore. I'm beginning to get a lot of complaints from the people. They would actually,
Right here.
no, that's topsoil. And now we have topsoil that's needed too. And I think we could use that topsoil. But I'm talking right there. Yeah. Could we try and make a deal? The contractor could do all the hauling, the loading, and all that. Because I believe his pit is in North Ogden, so he's got quite a bit of truck time anyway. Maybe there's a deal that could be made here to where that material could be used and gone. It's kind of hard to use that material in an 8 to 10 inch layer of road base. You know, you typically want to use a state spec or a really refined, fresh, non-recycled road base. But this stuff's excellent for going deep down. We've got 8 to 10 foot cuts that we have to fill down on Angel. And, you know, it could be, you know, for the product alone, we're still going to have it's not $250 in savings, but whatever the product itself is in the 1763, we could cut out and we get rid of those piles. We get people happy. And then if we do a pile operation again, I'd like to suggest that we move it over to the ops center now that we have all that open land again. And that would actually help Cole Stevens not have to keep weeds down, or maybe do away with this crushing idea altogether and stop having that eyesore in the city. We're really kind of growing, becoming really tightly urban now, and this is a little unsightly. So just a thought. Had some neighbors concerned about that, and they don't know how to address it. I see it as a win-win if a little salesmanship could be applied to the Angel Street contractor, if he would chew all that up first. So kind of a value engineering approach. And then we do have a lot of pipe in the public works yard. We have I inventoried it, and there's about $115,000 to $120,000 sitting on the ground of pipe right now that we own, which is substantial. And off of memory, I believe there is some 18 or 24 inch pipe. The pipe that's spec'd to go down the Angel Creek is 3 foot diameter. But we could double barrel that potentially and use some of the inventory in the yard. So just value engineer ideas. The biggest ticket is the eyesore, but also there's quite a substantial amount of pipe in the yard that could potentially be value engineered into the situation. And where I believe it seems like we have the upper hand, maybe that's something that we could say, hey, this, I mean, we're now having to go back and pay substantial or whatever amounts of money for people's property down there.
well, there's a chunk of money right there, and I was told it was gonna be used, I just don't see it being chewed up, and this is a great gorge to go put it in and compact it down, so I'd like to throw that out there.
Is that something, Shane, that you could look into if it meets the spec and something that could be done?
Councilmember Adams raised this to me earlier in the week, and I've mentioned this to our Public Works Director, who's responsible for this site, as well as what happens at the Ops Center, and so he's taking that under advisement and has a meeting with JUB, and Butters, I think, is the contractor there on Angel Street, so he's going to mention that to them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other council reports? Hearing none, next we have approval of minutes. We have one set.
We don't have a set.
Yeah, you're right, that's right. We have no minutes. Next item that we have is calendar. You have before you a 3-month calendar. As was mentioned, the city council meeting was moved till June 6th after the public hearing. Pickleball ribbon cutting is Thursday, June 1st at 6:30 p.m. And I'll let you review the other items, and nothing else. We'll welcome a motion to adjourn.
We obviously have our biggest single event of the year, a community event coming up on the 4th of July. It's hard to believe we're only about 6 weeks away from that. So, coming up, we got a lot of people planning and getting ready for that. It might be good to have on the calendar, the public calendar. I'm not sure if this mirrors the public calendar, but some of those events that are scheduled for that would be good to get on here as well. But I have nothing else on the calendar, Mayor, so I'd move that we adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A motion by Councilmember Snell, second by Councilmember Page to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.